Imagine your biggest problem is a broken glue gun and a cat who eats packing peanuts. Now, imagine the man you hired to protect you isn't a bodyguard at all. He's a predator in a bespoke suit, a lethal king hiding in plain sight. And he's staring at you with a hunger that defies all logic. She thought she was hiring cheap security for a flea market necklace. Instead, she just walked into a war that's been silent for centuries. What happens when the monster everyone fears becomes the only safe place left? Before we step into the crossfire, hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed to Linus Romantasy Collection for more high-heat romance. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from today? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Interview. The glue gun hissed at Ava Bennett like a cornered snake, spitting a glob of molten adhesive onto her thumb. Son of a... Ava dropped the plastic casing, shaking her hand wildly. Traitor! I bought you on sale, and this is how you repay me? She shoved the thumb into her mouth, tasting bitter craft glue and regret. Her studio, a converted loft that smelled of ozone, old coffee, and metallic dust, was currently a disaster zone. Beads were scattered across the floor like hail. Half-packed boxes teetered in towers that defied physics. Somewhere under a pile of bubble wrap, her phone was buzzing with a threat she didn't have time to process. Yeti! She yelled around her thumb. Stop eating the packing peanuts. They aren't shrimp. From atop a filing cabinet, a massive cloud-white Persian cat stared down at her. He blinked one blue eye, slowly, deliberately, and then batted another styrofoam peanut into his mouth. He chewed with aggressive eye contact. I live with a monster, Ava muttered, pulling her thumb out. It was red, but she'd survive. She checked the clock on the wall, a vintage piece made of gears she'd welded together. 8:59 a.m. The Bodyguard agency had promised the replacement would be here by 9. Her last security guard had quit 3 days ago after Yeti had strategically vomited in his boots. But with the red ledger ruby sitting in her safe, a piece of costume jewelry she'd picked up at a flea market that apparently half the city's criminal underworld wanted, she couldn't afford to be unguarded. The heavy steel door at the front of the loft creaked. It didn't open, it was shoved. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The air, usually smelling of stale espresso, suddenly felt charged, heavy, and tasting of impending thunder. Ava spun around, a box of semi-precious agates in her hands. A man stood in the doorway. He was excessive. That was the only word for him. He was too tall for the doorframe, too broad for the expensive charcoal suit that strained across his shoulders, and far too dangerous for a Tuesday morning. He didn't look like a bodyguard. He looked like the guy the bodyguard called when things went wrong. His hair was dark, styled with a careless precision that screamed money. His face was a map of sharp angles and unyielding lines, with a jaw set so tight a muscle ticked rhythmically beneath the skin. But it was his eyes that made Ava pause. They were gray, stormy, flat, and utterly devoid of warmth. He took a step inside, and the floorboards groaned. He didn't look at her. He looked at the room, scanning the corners, the windows, the exits, with the efficiency of a predator assessing a hunting ground. This was Maximus Hale, the Alpha King, the ruler of the Eastern Seaboard Pack, and he wasn't here to apply for a job. He was here to take the red stone that hummed in the safe, snap the neck of whoever got in his way, and leave before lunch. He spotted Ava. He took another step, his intent violent and clear. You're late, Ava snapped. Maximus froze. I said, you're late, she repeated, hoisting the box of agates higher. The email said 9 sharp. It is now 9:01. If you want to work for me, you need to respect the clock. Time is money, and I have neither. Maximus stared at her. For a terrifying second, he didn't speak. The violence in his gut, which had been coiled tight and ready to strike, suddenly hit a wall. A scent hit him. It wasn't perfume. It was biological. It was the smell of vanilla, solder smoke, and pure, unadulterated chaos. It slammed into his senses, bypassing his logic and wiring itself directly into the primitive wolf part of his brain. Mine, the wolf whispered. Maximus blinked. The sensation was like being hit with a taser. His wolf, usually a raging beast he had to beat into submission mentally, suddenly curled up and purred. No, Maximus thought, absolutely not. She is human. She is small. She is wearing a sweater that is 3 sizes too big and covered in paint. Well, Ava tapped her foot. Are you going to stand there looking scary, or are you going to help me move these? The expo is in an hour. Maximus opened his mouth to issue a command that would make a legion of shifters drop to their knees. I am not. Quiet. Less talking, more lifting. Ava marched up to him. Up close, he was even bigger. She had to crane her neck back to look him in the eye. She shoved the heavy box of rocks into his chest. His reflexes took over. He caught the box before it hit his silk tie. Heavy, right? Ava brushed her hands on her leggings. Put that in the car. It's the yellow one out front. Don't crush it. The suspension is sensitive. Maximus looked down at the box. Then he looked at the woman. He should drop the box. He should demand the ruby. He should growl. But his hands tightened around the cardboard. The instinct to serve, to protect, to please the source of that vanilla scent was overwhelming. It was a physical compulsion, stronger than gravity. You hired a bodyguard, Maximus said. His voice was a low rumble, like gravel shifting in a landslide. It wasn't a question. Obviously, and you're him, though I expected someone named Agent Smith. Ava grabbed her purse and a travel mug. What happened to him? Get a flat tire? Something like that, Maximus grunted. He didn't mention that he had bought the agency 10 minutes ago and ordered Agent Smith to take a paid vacation to the Bahamas. What's your name then? You don't look like a Smith. Max, he gritted out. It was the only syllable his brain could supply. Okay, Max, welcome to the team. Don't steal anything, don't hit on me, and don't let anyone kill me. Standard rules. She whistled sharply. Yeti, let's go. From the filing cabinet, the white fluff cloud launched himself. Maximus tensed, expecting an attack. He liked cats about as much as he liked silver bullets. They were sneaky, disloyal creatures. Yeti landed with a heavy thump directly in front of Maximus's polished Italian leather shoes. The cat looked up, his squashed nose twitching. He sniffed the cuff of Maximus's trousers. Then, the cat did the unthinkable. He rubbed his face against Maximus's shin, purring like a diesel engine. Ava stopped halfway to the door, her jaw dropping. No way. Maximus looked down at the animal. He is shitting on me. He hates men, Ava whispered, looking at Maximus with new suspicion. He bit my ex-boyfriend in the ankle so hard, he needed stitches. Why does he like you? Maximus knew why. The cat was an animal. It sensed the apex predator in the room and was smart enough to submit. Or maybe the cat just liked the smell of the wolf. I have a calming presence, Maximus lied. The words tasted like ash. Right, you look about as calm as a bomb, Ava snorted. Grab the cat carrier, it's the pink one. She turned and marched out the door. Maximus Hale, Alpha King, owner of half the city's real estate, and the most feared predator on the East Coast, stood alone in the messy loft. He looked at the box of rocks in his hands. He looked at the pink plastic cat carrier. Take the ruby, his logic screamed. It's in the safe behind the painting. He took a step toward the safe. Nausea slammed into him, violent and immediate. His vision blurred, his body physically rejected the idea of stealing from her. The mate bond. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was a cage. He couldn't steal from her, he couldn't hurt her. If he wanted that ruby, she had to give it to him. You coming, Max? Her voice echoed from the hallway. Coming, he growled. He grabbed the pink carrier. Chapter 2. The Yellow Beetle. The car was a joke, a literal wheeled joke. Maximus stared at the vehicle parked at the curb. It was a vintage Volkswagen Beetle, painted the color of a radioactive lemon. It had eyelashes on the headlights. Actual plastic eyelashes. Get in, Ava said, unlocking the driver's side. And be careful with the door handle, it sticks. Maximus looked at his own car parked across the street. A matte black Audi RSQ8 with bulletproof glass and an engine that sounded like a war cry. It was secure. It was dignified. It was safe. We should take my vehicle, Maximus suggested, gesturing to the beast across the road. Ava glanced at the Audi, then rolled her eyes. Look at you, Agent Fancy Pants. No, Bumble gets jealous if I drive other cars. Plus, all my inventory is already in the back. Get in. She slid into the driver's seat. Maximus exhaled a breath that fogged the cool morning air. He folded his 6'5" frame and attempted to insert himself into the passenger seat. It was like trying to fit a grizzly bear into a shoebox. His knees hit the dashboard hard. His head brushed the ceiling liner, which was sagging slightly. Comfortable? Ava asked, jamming the key into the ignition.
I feel like I am being digested,
Maximus replied, his voice flat. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with a sound like a lawnmower choking on a rock. Ava patted the dashboard affectionately. Good girl, Bumble. She pulled out into traffic, driving with an aggressive style that terrified him more than any territorial dispute he'd ever fought. She wove between taxis, cursed at pedestrians, and hummed off-key to the radio. So, Ava said, swerving around a pothole, let's go over the resume. The agency said you're highly qualified, which usually means you know karate and have anger issues. Can you shoot? Yes. Can you fight? Yes. Can you do CPR? I can stop a heart. I assume starting one is the reverse process. Ava laughed. It was a bright, genuine sound that made the hair on Maximus's arms stand up. Okay, funny guy. What about the important stuff? Do you do coffee runs? I do not, Maximus said stiffly. He had interns for that. He had interns for his interns. Cat sitting? Absolutely not. Window washing? Maximus turned his head slowly to look at her. His neck cricked. I was hired for protection, Miss Bennett, not domestic servitude. Touchy, she muttered. And call me Ava. Miss Bennett is my mother, and she's terrifying. They hit a red light. The car idled, vibrating violently. Maximus looked at her profile. A stray curl of chestnut hair had escaped her messy bun and bobbed against her cheek. His fingers twitched with the urge to tuck it back. He clenched his fist on his knee. This was a disaster. He needed to get the ruby and leave. The stone, Maximus said, keeping his voice casual. The red ledger. You have it on you? Ava tapped her chest. Right here. Maximus's gaze dropped. There, resting against the skin of her collarbone, suspended on a cheap gold chain, was the ruby. It pulsed with a faint inner light that only he could see. The power of his ancestors. The key to controlling the rogue packs. It was inches away. He could reach out, snap the chain, and phase through the door before she could blink. He lifted his hand. The car hit a bump. Ava's hand shot out to steady the wheel, and her fingers brushed his wrist. Zap! Static electricity, hot and sharp, arced between them. Ava gasped and yanked her hand back. Ow! You're shocky! Maximus stared at his wrist. The contact hadn't just been static. It had felt like a brand. His wolf howled in the back of his mind, pacing, demanding he claim, protect, keep. Sorry, Ava muttered, rubbing her hand. Must be the wool sweater. Miss Bennett, Maximus said, his voice rough. Why do you have that stone? Do you know what it is? It's a ruby. Well, a synthetic one, probably. I got it for $5 at a swap meet in Jersey, she said casually. But ever since I bought it, weird stuff keeps happening. People breaking into the shop, creepy guys following me. That's why I hired you. She looked at him, her hazel eyes wide and surprisingly vulnerable. I'm good at a lot of things, Max. I can weld silver, I can talk a landlord out of an eviction, and I can parallel park this death trap. But I don't know how to fight. I'm scared. The confession hung in the tiny rattling car. Maximus felt the last of his resolve crumble. He couldn't take the stone. If he took it, she would be defenseless against the rogues hunting her. The only way to keep the stone safe was to keep her safe. You do not need to be scared, Maximus said. The command in his voice was absolute. I will not let anything touch you. Ava smiled, a small, crooked thing. You take this job really seriously, huh? You have no idea. The car sputtered and died in the middle of the intersection. Oh, come on! Ava hit the steering wheel. Bumble, not now! Horns blared behind them. A taxi driver leaned out his window, screaming obscenities. Maximus unbuckled his seatbelt. Stay here. He got out of the car. He walked to the back bumper of the Beetle. He ignored the screaming taxi driver. He placed one hand on the trunk of the car. He didn't push. He simply walked forward. The car, despite the parking brake being half engaged, rolled forward effortlessly under his strength, clearing the intersection and coasting to the curb. He got back in. He wasn't even out of breath. Ava stared at him, mouth agape. Did you just push my car uphill? Maximus adjusted his cufflinks. I work out. Chapter 3. The Move-In. Ava's apartment building was a pre-war walk-up that had clearly lost the war. The brick was crumbling, the fire escape looked like a tetanus shot waiting to happen, and the graffiti on the front door was simply the word, "Run," in red spray paint. Maximus stood on the sidewalk, holding the cat carrier. He looked at the building, then at Ava. No, he said. Ava blinked, fumbling with her keys. What do you mean, no? This is where I live. Rent control is a beautiful thing, Max. This structure is compromised, Maximus stated. He pointed to a window on the second floor. That latch is broken. The fire escape is a direct access point for hostiles, and I can smell mold from here. Well, unless you have a portable fortress in your pocket, this is it, Ava said, sounding defensive. Look, I know it's not the Ritz, but pack a bag, Maximus interrupted. Excuse me? You are not staying here. It is indefensible. If the people hunting you are as dangerous as you say, staying here is suicide. He checked his watch. You have 10 minutes. Grab the essentials. And the cat food. Ava crossed her arms. I am not going anywhere with a stranger. I hired a bodyguard, not a kidnapper. Maximus stepped closer. He invaded her personal space, using his height to box her in against the door. It was an intimidation tactic he used in boardrooms to make billionaires weep. Ava, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Someone broke into your shop this morning. Do you think they don't know where you sleep? If I leave you here, you will not wake up tomorrow. Ava swallowed hard. She looked at his eyes. They were hard, unrelenting, but honest. Where would we go? She whispered. I have a safe house. Maximus lied smoothly. It was actually his primary residence, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, but she didn't need to know that. It is secure. Ava hesitated, then sighed. Fine, but if you murder me, my ghost is gonna haunt you so hard. I'm talking poltergeist-level annoying. 30 minutes later, the yellow Beetle was abandoned, safely parked, and Ava was sitting in the passenger seat of the Audi RSQ8. The silence in the car was heavy. The Audi glided over potholes that would have shattered Bumble's axle. The interior smelled of expensive leather and something woodsy. Sandalwood, maybe? It smelled like Max. They pulled up to a building that was less safe house and more villain lair. It was a spire of glass and steel piercing the Manhattan skyline. This is the safe house? Ava asked as the valet opened her door. It is adequate, Maximus said. He led her through a private lobby into a private elevator that required a retinal scan. As they shot up 60 floors, Ava's ears popped. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. Ava stepped out and gasped. The entire front wall was floor-to-ceiling glass. The city lay spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds. The floors were polished dark wood. The furniture was sleek, modern, and looked like it cost more than Ava's entire life earnings. Who owns this place? Ava whispered, spinning in a circle. Batman? A client, Maximus said quickly. He is out of town. He lets the agency use it for high-risk targets. He set the cat carrier down and opened the latch. Yeti emerged. The cat took one look at the sprawling luxury, the leather sofas, the velvet drapes, and let out a meow of pure approval. He trotted directly to the centerpiece of the room, a massive black leather sectional, and began to knead his claws into it. Yeti, no! Ava lunged for the cat. Leave him, Maximus said, wincing slightly as he watched the cat puncture the Italian leather. It is fine. Ava stood up, looking out of place in her oversized sweater and leggings. She hugged herself, looking small against the backdrop of the massive city. "So," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "we just live here now?" Maximus took off his suit jacket, tossing it over a chair. The movement revealed the gun holster under his arm and the white dress shirt clinging to his muscular frame. He rolled up his sleeves, exposing thick forearms marked with faint, silvery scars. "You live here," Maximus corrected. "I work here." He walked over to the security panel on the wall and punched in a code. Steel shutters began to lower over the glass windows, sealing them in. "Get comfortable, Ava," he said, turning to face her. The golden flecks in his gray eyes seemed to catch the light. "You are under my protection now, and I take my job very seriously." Ava swallowed. She felt a strange flutter in her stomach, part fear, part relief, and a third part she didn't want to examine too closely. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, Max." Maximus watched her, his wolf paced in his mind, satisfied. She was in his territory. She was behind his walls. Now he just had to figure out how to survive her without losing his mind. Chapter 4. The Price of Safety. The silence in the penthouse was expensive. It was the kind of quiet you only got 60 floors up, behind triple-paned, bullet-resistant glass. It was suffocating. Ava stood in the middle of the living room, clutching her purse to her chest. She looked down at her leggings, which had a small hole near the knee, and her oversized sweater that smelled like the glue she'd been using earlier. "I need clothes," she announced. Maximus was standing by the window, peering through the slats of the security shutters. He had put his charcoal suit jacket back on, hiding the shoulder holster, but the lethal energy rolling off him hadn't diminished. He turned slowly. "I can have a stylist deliver a wardrobe. Give me your sizes." "Absolutely not," Ava said, appalled. "I am not letting some stranger pick out my pants. Besides, I need to go to my apartment. I have stuff there, my toothbrush, my anxiety medication, Yeti's special kidney health kibble." "Your apartment is burned," Maximus said. He didn't mean literally, though the tone suggested he wouldn't mind lighting the match himself. "Hostiles know the location. We are not going back." "Then we are going shopping," Ava countered. "Or you can explain to the agency why your client died of starvation and gingivitis." Maximus stared at her, his jaw clenched, the muscle feathering beneath the skin. He looked at his watch, then at the perimeter monitors, then back at her. He seemed to be calculating the odds of a sniper attack versus the odds of Ava driving him insane if they stayed indoors. "Fine," he gritted out. "But we take my car, and you do not wander off. You stay within arm's reach. If I tell you to move, you move. If I tell you to duck, you hit the floor. Understood?" "Aye, aye, Captain Tight Pants," Ava muttered. Maximus narrowed his eyes, but he grabbed his keys. The garage beneath the building was a fortress of concrete and fluorescent light. The Audi RSQ8 sat in its designated spot like a sleeping panther, matte gray, low to the ground, and radiating menace. Ava whistled as she approached it. "Okay, I admit it. Bumble is cute, but this is a villain car. Do you have a button that releases an oil slick?" "Get in," Maximus said, opening the passenger door. The interior smelled of rich leather and absolute cleanliness. There were no empty coffee cups, no gum wrappers, not even a speck of dust. It was sterile. Ava sat down, feeling like a chaotic smudge on a perfect canvas. Maximus slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, a deep, throaty rumble that vibrated in Ava's chest. He pulled out of the garage with the precision of a surgeon, merging into the chaotic mid-morning traffic without hesitation. "Where are we going?" Maximus asked. "There's a pharmacy and a department store on 5th, Ava said. "I need the basics." 5th is acceptable, high security visibility, Maximus noted. The drive was tense. Ava kept glancing at him. He drove with one hand on the wheel, his grip relaxed but ready. His eyes constantly scanned the mirrors. Every time a car got too close, his shoulders tensed. "You really think someone is going to attack us in broad daylight?" Ava asked, breaking the silence. "For a fake ruby?" "It is not fake," Maximus said quietly. "It cost $5, Max." "Value is subjective." He glanced at her neck, where the chain disappeared beneath her sweater. The craving to touch it, to touch her, hit him like a wave of nausea. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. Keep it hidden. They parked in a private garage and took the elevator up to the street level. The air outside was crisp, filled with the noise of the city. Ava took a deep breath, happy to be out of the sterile penthouse. Maximus was instantly at her side. He didn't walk next to her. He orbited her. He was a looming shadow, placing his body between her and the crowd. When a businessman on a cell phone walked too close, Maximus stepped in his path, forcing the man to swerve. The man looked up, ready to yell, saw Maximus's face, and immediately looked at his shoes, muttering an apology. "You're scaring the locals," Ava whispered, nudging his arm. "Good," Maximus replied. They entered the department store. Ava headed for the essentials section. She grabbed a toothbrush, face wash, and a pack of socks. She moved to the clothing rack, pulling out a pair of jeans. "Too thin," Maximus critiqued, looming over her shoulder. "Denim offers zero ballistic protection." "I'm not planning on getting shot, Max. I'm planning on looking cute." "Dead is not cute." Ava rolled her eyes and grabbed the jeans anyway. "I'm hungry. Let's grab a pretzel from the cart outside and head back." "You're making me nervous with all the hovering." They exited the store. The sidewalk was crowded. Maximus scanned the rooftops, his senses dialed to 11. He could smell everything: exhaust, cheap perfume, frying dough, and sulfur. The scent of a shifter. A rogue. Maximus stopped, his hand shooting out to grab Ava's arm. "Ava, wait." "What? The pretzel cart is right." A man in a hooded sweatshirt slammed into Ava. It wasn't an accident. He moved with unnatural speed, his hand darting not for her purse, but for her throat. He grabbed the gold chain. "Give it to me," the man hissed. His voice was guttural, distorted. Ava screamed, stumbling back. The chain dug into her neck. Maximus didn't think. He moved. He covered the distance in the blur that the security cameras would only register as a glitch. He grabbed the attacker's wrist. There was a sickening crack as Maximus applied a fraction of his alpha strength. The attacker howled, a sound that was too deep, too animalistic for a human, and dropped the chain. Maximus didn't stop. He spun the man around, slamming him face first into the brick wall of the department store. Dust rained down. "Who sent you?" Maximus roared. His voice wasn't human. It was the command, the alpha voice. The attacker whimpered, his knees buckling under the pressure of the command. The Packless. He wants the stone." Maximus leaned in, his face inches from the attacker's ear. "Tell him," Maximus whispered, "that if he touches her again, I will mount his head on a spike." He shoved the man away. The attacker scrambled up, clutching his broken wrist, and vanished into the crowd with terrified speed. Maximus turned to Ava. She was pressed against the glass display of the store, clutching her throat. Her eyes were wide, fixed on his face. "Max?" she whispered. Maximus realized his mistake instantly. He could feel the heat in his eyes, the gold. He blinked rapidly, forcing the wolf back, forcing the gray to return. He adjusted his cuffs, his breathing heavy. "Are you injured?" he demanded, his voice rough. "Your eyes," Ava stammered. They were yellow." "Refraction," Maximus lied. He grabbed her arm, gentle but firm. "From the sun. We are leaving. Now." Chapter 5. The Alley. The drive back was silent. Ava sat with her knees pulled to her chest, rubbing the red mark on her neck where the chain had dug in. She kept looking at Maximus sideways. He wasn't normal. She knew bodyguards were tough, but the way he had moved, it was like watching a hydraulic press crush a soda can. And the sound the attacker had made. And the eyes. Maximus was gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. He was furious. Furious at the rogues for daring to touch her. Furious at himself for almost shifting in public. They pulled into the penthouse garage. The valet, a nervous teenager named Kevin, took the keys, giving Maximus a wide berth. They took the elevator up. The silence was thick enough to chew on. "Max," Ava started as the door slid open. "Back there, that guy. He said the Packless. What does that mean?" "It's a gang term," Maximus said shortly. Criminal slang. Ignore it. He unlocked the penthouse door. Chaos ensued. Maximus had opened the door first to clear the room. It was standard protocol, but he had forgotten the one variable he couldn't control: Yeti. The massive white cat had been waiting by the door, presumably plotting murder. As soon as the gap appeared, Yeti shot out between Maximus's legs like a fuzzy white torpedo. "Yeti, no!" Ava screamed. The cat didn't stop. He sprinted down the hallway toward the fire exit, which, cursed be the cleaning crew, had been propped open with a doorstop. "Get back here, you walking carpet!" Ava yelled, dropping her shopping bags. She took off running. "Ava, stop!" Maximus roared. She didn't listen. She sprinted past the elevators, through the fire door and into the stairwell. Yeti was already 3 flights down, his claws clicking on the concrete. "I am going to kill that cat," Maximus growled. He abandoned the secure perimeter and sprinted after her. They chased the cat down 10 flights of stairs. Yeti, fueled by defiance and lack of exercise, finally bolted out a service exit that spilled into the back alley behind the building. The alley was narrow, shadowed by the towering skyscrapers on either side. It smelled of wet cardboard and trash. Ava burst out the door, her chest heaving. "Yeti! Come here right now!" She spotted him. The white cat was frozen near a dumpster, his back arched, his tail puffed up to the size of a bottle brush. He was hissing at the shadows. "Got you!" Ava gasped, bending down to scoop him up. "Ava, don't move." Maximus's voice came from behind her. It wasn't loud, it was deadly quiet. Ava froze, Yeti in her arms. She looked up. Stepping out from the shadows at the end of the alley were 3 men. They were dirty, wearing tattered clothes, but their movement was fluid, predatory. They didn't walk, they stalked, and they were all staring at her throat. "Pretty rock," the center one said. He smiled, revealing teeth that looked too sharp, too yellow. "Pretty girl." "Back away," Maximus said, stepping in front of Ava. He shrugged off his suit jacket, letting it drop to the dirty ground. He started to unbutton his cuffs. "Look at the suit," one of the thugs laughed. "Think you can take us, Richie Rich?" Maximus didn't laugh. He cracked his neck. "Take her and go back inside, Ava." "Max, there are 3 of them," Ava whispered, clutching Yeti so hard the cat wheezed. "They have knives." "I don't care if they have a tank," Maximus said. "Go." The 3 men lunged. Ava screamed. What happened next defied everything Ava knew about physics. Maximus didn't dodge. He met the charge head on. He caught the first man by the throat, lifting him one-handed off the ground like he weighed nothing, and threw him into the second man. They collapsed in a tangle of limbs. The third man, the one with the knife, slashed at Maximus's chest. Maximus caught the blade with his bare hand. Ava gasped, but there was no blood. Maximus twisted the knife out of the man's grip and delivered a kick to the chest that sent the attacker flying backward into a dumpster. The metal dented with a loud gong. The first 2 scrambled up, their eyes flashing that same sickly yellow Ava had seen earlier. They growled, a low, vibrating sound that rattled Ava's teeth. Maximus stood his ground. He took a deep breath, his chest expanding, and then he let out a sound. It wasn't a word, it was a snarl. A deep, resonant, subsonic vibration that hit Ava in the chest like a bass drum. "Submit." The air in the alley seemed to warp. The 3 attackers froze. They whimpered, clutching their heads, terrified by the power rolling off the man in the white shirt. "Scram," Maximus said. 1 word, flat, final. The 3 men turned and ran, tripping over each other to get away from him. Maximus stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his back to Ava. He looked at his hand, checking for damage. Ava stood paralyzed, hugging the cat. "Max?" she squeaked. Maximus turned around. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. His hair was messy. He looked wild, terrifying, beautiful. "I told you," he said, his voice rough, "to stay inside." Chapter 6. The Aftermath. The elevator ride back up was not silent. It was explosive. "Are you insane?" Ava yelled, pacing the small metal box. Yeti was safely locked in this carrier now, yowling his displeasure. "You caught a knife! With your hand! Who does that? Are you a cyborg? Are you Captain America?" Maximus stood in the corner, leaning against the rail, watching her. The adrenaline was still coursing through his veins. His wolf was pacing, agitated, wanting to check her for bites, for scratches, for fear. I assessed the threat, Maximus said calmly. The blade was dull. His form was sloppy. Sloppy? He launched you into a dumpster. He launched himself into a dumpster. There is a difference. The doors pinged open. They stormed into the penthouse. Sit, Maximus ordered, pointing to the sofa. Stop ordering me around. Ava threw her hands up. You act like you own me. I am trying to keep you alive, Maximus roared back. The volume of his voice shook the glass walls. Ava froze. Maximus stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The air crackled with that strange static electricity again, stronger than before. Do you have any idea, Maximus said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, what those men would have done to you? They are animals, Ava. They don't want the stone. They want to tear apart anything that stands in their way. He reached out, his large hands hovering over her shoulders. Did they touch you? Anywhere? No, Ava whispered. She was trembling, but not from fear. Not anymore. Maximus was too close. She could smell him, that woodsy rainstorm scent that made her head spin. She looked up at him. His gray eyes were dark, the pupils blown wide. Let me see, he murmured. His hands landed on her arms. He ran his palms down her elbows to her wrists, checking for injuries. His touch was hot, searing through the wool of her sweater. I'm fine, Max, she breathed. You ran, he accused, but his thumbs were tracing the pulse point on her wrist. You ran into a dead end. I was saving my cat. The cat, Maximus growled, glancing at the carrier where Yeti was now grooming himself, is a menace. He's family. Maximus looked back at her. His gaze dropped to her lips. The air left the room. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She should pull away. She should fire him. He was dangerous. He was violent. He was clearly hiding something massive. But she didn't want to move. She wanted to lean in. Maximus lowered his head slowly. The restraint was snapping, thread by thread. He wanted to taste her. He needed to know if she tasted as chaotic and sweet as she smelled. Ava. He groaned. He leaned in. Ava tilted her head back, her eyes fluttering shut. Crash! They both jumped back as if scalded. On the other side of the room, a Ming vase lay in shattered pieces on the floor. Yeti sat on the mantelpiece, looking down at the wreckage with a bored expression. He had escaped the carrier. Again. Yeti! Ava shrieked, the romantic tension popping like a soap bubble. Maximus stared at the cat. He looked at the vase, which was worth $40,000. He looked at Ava, whose cheeks were flushed pink. He dragged a hand down his face. I am going to shave that cat bald. Don't you dare! Ava rushed over to the mess. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for it. I can't pay for it, but I'll glue it back together. Maximus watched her scrambling on the floor, picking up shards of porcelain. The moment was gone. The wolf retreated, sulking. Leave it, Maximus said, his voice exhausted. Housekeeping will get it. He turned and walked toward the hallway. I need a drink and a shower. Lock your door, Ava. And lock the cat up. If I see him before sunrise, he becomes a pair of mittens. He slammed his bedroom door shut. Ava sat on the floor, holding a piece of blue pottery. She looked at the closed door, her heart still racing. What is happening to me? She whispered to the cat. Yeti just blinked and licked his paw. Chapter 7. Kitchen Nightmares and Diamond Dust. The door to the master bedroom remained shut for 2 hours. In that time, Ava had swept up the remains of the $40,000 vase, apologized to the empty air, and realized she was starving. Her stomach let out a growl that rivaled the one Max had unleashed in the alley. Okay, Yeti, she whispered to the cat, who was currently batting a shard of Ming Dynasty porcelain under the sofa. We need food. And since Captain Grumpy is brooding in his cave, it's up to us. She wandered into the kitchen. If the living room was a villain's lair, the kitchen was a laboratory. Everything was stainless steel, black marble, and terrifyingly buttonless. The stove looked like a sleek obsidian slab that might launch a missile if she touched it wrong. "How hard can grilled cheese be?" Ava muttered. She found bread in a hidden pantry that slid out of the wall. She found cheddar in a refrigerator that was larger than her bathroom. She found a pan that looked heavy enough to bludgeon a rhino. 10 minutes later, the penthouse was filled with the acrid, undeniable scent of burning carbohydrates. "No, no, no!" Ava frantically waved a dish towel at the smoke rising from the pan. She couldn't find the fan switch. She couldn't find a window to open. "Don't set off the sprinklers! Max will kill me!" The bedroom door flew open. Maximus stormed out. He had showered. The torn white shirt was gone, replaced by a plain black t-shirt that clung to him like a second skin, dump patches still visible on the cotton. He wore gray sweatpants that hung low on his hips, leaving his feet bare. It was a domestic look that should have been disarming. Instead, with his wet hair dripping onto his forehead and his eyes wild, he looked like a god of war who had been woken up from a nap. "Fire?" he barked, scanning the room for threats. "Cooking!" Ava yelled back, coughing. "I'm cooking!" Maximus marched into the kitchen. He didn't say a word. He reached over her shoulder, engulfing her in the scent of cedar soap and heat, and tapped a hidden sensor on the backsplash. A silent exhaust fan roared to life, sucking the smoke away in seconds. He looked down at the pan. The sandwich was a charcoal brick. "You are trying to poison us," he stated flatly. "I was trying to make lunch," Ava defended, crossing her arms over her chest. She winced slightly as the movement pulled the skin on her neck where the chain had cut her. Maximus's eyes snapped to the red bruise on her throat. His expression darkened, the irritation vanishing, replaced by a cold, simmering intensity. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from her skin. "Does it hurt?" he asked, his voice low. "It's fine," Ava lied. "Just a scratch. The sandwich is the real casualty here." Maximus stared at her for a beat too long, his nostrils flaring slightly. Then he turned to the trash can, dumped the pan's contents, and tossed the pan into the sink with a clang. "Sit down," he ordered, "before you burn the building down." Ava sat at the island counter. "I assume you can do better?" Maximus ignored her. He moved through the kitchen with an efficiency that was mesmerizing. He pulled out eggs, vegetables, and spices Ava hadn't even seen. He chopped an onion so fast his hand was a blur. It was rhythmic, precise, and terrifyingly competent. "Where did you learn to cook?" Ava asked, resting her chin on her hand. "Bodyguard school?" "Survival training," Max grunted, flipping an omelet. "If you can't feed yourself, you die, and I like to eat well." He slid a plate in front of her, a perfect fluffy omelet with spinach and feta, flanked by toast that was actually golden brown. Ava took a bite. She groaned. "Okay, you're hired, forever. This is better than sex." Maximus froze, the spatula in his hand stilling. He looked at her, his eyes darkening to the color of wet slate. "You have low standards." "Or you're just a really good cook," Ava mumbled, shoving another forkful into her mouth to shut herself up. They ate in silence, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence from the car. It was easier. Yeti jumped up onto the counter, defying all health codes. He walked right past Ava and sat directly in front of Max, staring at his plate. "No," Max said to the cat. Yeti extended one paw and touched Max's hand. Max sighed. He cut a small piece of omelet, cooled, and offered it. Yeti ate it delicately, then curled up next to Max's plate and immediately fell asleep, his head resting on Max's forearm. Ava watched, fascinated. "He really likes you." "He usually hisses at anyone with testosterone." "He knows I'm the alpha," Max muttered, then cleared his throat. "The dominant personality in the room." "Sure," Ava smirked. She pulled her sketchbook out of her bag. "Since we're stuck here, I need to work. I have a commission due next week." Maximus didn't push her away. He finished his meal with his left hand, leaving his right arm pinned under the sleeping cat. He watched as she sketched, quick, charcoal strokes forming the shape of a necklace. "The structure is weak," he said suddenly. Ava looked up. "Excuse me?" He pointed a fork at the paper. "The clasp. You have it bearing the weight of the central setting. If the wearer moves too fast, the torque will snap the chain. You need a reinforced bezel here." He tapped the spot. Ava blinked. She looked at the sketch. He was right. "How do you know that?" she asked. "Do you moonlight at Tiffany's?" "I know stress points," Max said simply. "Whether it's a bridge, a bone, or a necklace, physics is universal." Ava looked at him, really looked at him. The scars on his arms, the lethal grace, the way he tolerated her cat, and the fact that he just fixed her jewelry design while eating an omelet. "Who are you, Max?" she whispered. Maximus looked at her. For a second, he looked like he wanted to tell her, to drop the mask. "I'm the guy who keeps you alive," he said. "Finish your eggs." Chapter 8. The Invitation. The peace lasted exactly 24 hours. By Wednesday evening, the penthouse felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. Ava had paced the length of the living room 40 times. She had reorganized Max's bookshelf, by color, which he hated. She had tried to teach Yeti to fetch. He refused. Then, her phone pinged. Ava checked the screen and gasped. "Yes, finally!" Maximus was in the corner, doing one-arm push-ups that looked effortless. He paused mid-rep, his muscles bunching under his t-shirt. "Threat?" "Opportunity." Ava waved the phone. "The Metropolitan Charity Gala. I've been on the wait list for a ticket for months. They just had a cancellation. I'm in." Maximus stood up in one fluid motion. He didn't even look winded. "No." "Excuse me?" "No," he repeated, wiping his hands on a towel. "You are not going to a gala. It's a security nightmare. Open floor plan, multiple entry points, hundreds of unvetted guests. It's a buffet for assassins." "It's a black tie event, Max, not a war zone," Ava argued, following him as he walked to the kitchen for water. "This is the biggest networking event of the year. If I wear the red ledger there, everyone will see it. Buyers, investors. My career needs this."
Your career needs you to be breathing.
Max slammed the water glass down.
The Packless attacked you in broad daylight yesterday.
"Do you think they won't try again in a crowded ballroom?" A crowd is the perfect cover. A bumped shoulder, a needle in the arm, and you're gone before you hit the floor. "I have a bodyguard." Ava poked him in the chest. It was like poking a steel door. "I have you, unless you're saying you can't handle it." Maximus looked down at her finger on his chest. His eyes flashed, just a flicker of gold. "I can handle anything, but I cannot protect you if you serve yourself up on a silver platter." "Then I guess I'm fired," Ava bluffed. She crossed her arms. "Because I'm going, with or without you. I'll take an Uber. I'll take Yeti. He has sharp claws." Maximus pinched the bridge of his nose. He let out a long, ragged exhale. The problem was, she meant it. He could smell the stubbornness on her. It smelled like ozone and burnt sugar. If he locked her in, she'd try to climb down the balcony. "Fine," he growled. "Fine?" Ava blinked, surprised her bluff worked. "We go, but on my terms." Max turned to face her, leaning back against the counter. "First, we take my car. Second, you wear a tracker. Third, I am not just your bodyguard tonight." "What are you then? My caterer?" "Your date," Max said. Ava's mouth opened, then closed. "My date?" "A bodyguard stands against the wall. A bodyguard is obvious. If I'm your date, I can stay by your side every second without raising suspicion. I can hold your arm. I can dance with you. I can put myself between you and anyone who looks at you wrong." He took a step closer. "If we do this, Ava, you don't leave my side. Not for a drink, not for the bathroom. You are glued to me. Do you understand?" Ava swallowed. The intensity in his gaze was heavy, physical. The idea of walking into a gala with Maximus Hale on her arm, it made her knees feel weirdly unstable. "Okay," she whispered. "Fake dating. I can do that." Maximus looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her messy hair and oversized clothes. "We have 3 hours. The stylist will be here in 20 minutes. Stylists? You represent me tonight as well, Max said, turning away to hide the smirk tugging at his mouth. We are not taking the beetle. Chapter 9. The Lion's Den. The transformation was painful, invasive, and undeniably effective. A team of 3 people, whom Max had apparently summoned from the ether, had descended on the penthouse. They plucked, painted, and polished Ava until she felt less like a human and more like a work of art. When they were finished, Ava stood before the full-length mirror in the guest room. She didn't recognize herself. The dress was a weapon. It was deep emerald green silk, backless, with a neckline that plunged dangerously low. It fit her curves so perfectly it looked like it had been poured on. Her hair was swept up in an elegant, chaotic twist that exposed the long line of her neck, and around her throat, resting against the pale skin, was the red ledger ruby. The stone seemed to pulse against the green silk, vibrant and bloody. "Miss Bennett?" The stylist knocked. "Mr. Hale is waiting." Ava took a deep breath. She grabbed a sleek clutch, which barely fit her phone, and walked out. Maximus was waiting in the living room. He was adjusting his cufflinks, his back to the hallway. He was wearing a tuxedo, but not a rental. It was a midnight blue bespoke suit with black satin lapels. It fit his broad shoulders wide enough to land a plane on, tapering down to a narrow waist. He looked expensive. He looked dangerous. He looked like the kind of man who owned the room before he even walked into it. "Max?" Ava said softly. Maximus turned. He stopped. His hands fell to his sides. He stared at her. For a long, agonizing moment, he didn't breathe. His wolf slammed against the bars of his mind, howling. Mate. Mine. Beautiful. The scent of her, vanilla, nervousness, and the metallic tang of the ruby filled the room. She looked regal. She looked like a queen. His queen. "Is it too much?" Ava asked, fidgeting with the slit in the dress. "I feel like I'm going to flash someone if I take a big step." Maximus walked toward her. He moved slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal. He stopped inches away. "You look..." His voice was rough, gravel grinding on glass. He cleared his throat. "Adequate." Ava laughed, the tension breaking. "Adequate? I'm wearing a dress that costs more than my college tuition, and I get adequate?" "If I tell you the truth," Maximus said, his gray eyes locking onto hers, "we will never make it to the car." Ava's breath hitched. The heat in his gaze was unmistakable. It wasn't the look of a bodyguard. It was the look of a man who was starving. "Let's go," he said abruptly, offering his arm. "The car is waiting." The drive to the Metropolitan Museum was a blur of city lights and nerves. The Audi RSQ8 glided through the streets like a shark in dark water. When they pulled up to the red carpet, the flash bulbs were blinding. "Stay close," Maximus murmured as the valet opened the door. Ava stepped out. The noise of the crowd was a physical wall. Ava, look here. Who are you wearing?" She felt a large, warm hand settle on the small of her back. It was heavy, possessive, and incredibly grounding. Maximus stepped out behind her, buttoning his jacket. The crowd went silent for a split second. The sheer size of him, the aura of absolute command he projected, stunned them. Then the whispers started. "Who is that? Is that a bodyguard? Look at the way he's holding her." Maximus guided her forward. He didn't smile for the cameras. He scanned the crowd, his eyes moving constantly. Every time a photographer got too close, Maximus shifted his body, placing himself as a barrier. He wasn't just escorting her, he was shielding her from the world. They reached the top of the stairs and entered the great hall. The gala was in full swing. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. A string quartet played something that sounded expensive. Champagne flowed like water. Ava took a breath, clutching her purse. "Okay, we're in. Now we just mingle." "We do not mingle," Maximus murmured in her ear. "We patrol, we assess, and we drink nothing that I haven't poured myself." He pulled her closer, his hand sliding from her back to link with hers, his fingers interlaced with hers, swallowing her hand completely. It was an intimate gesture, one that screamed she is mine to anyone watching. "Max," Ava whispered, looking up at him, "you're squeezing my hand." "There are 3 wolves in the corner," Maximus said, his voice barely audible. Do not look, just keep walking. Ava stiffened. Wolves? Here? Rogues in tuxedos are still rogues, Maximus said. Smile, Ava. Pretend you adore me. Ava looked up at his sharp jawline, the stormy eyes, the way his body curved around hers to protect her. I don't think I'll have to pretend very hard, she whispered. Maximus looked down at her, the corner of his mouth ticked up. Good, because the show is just starting. He led her into the ballroom, straight into the heart of the danger, with the confidence of a king bringing his queen to court. Chapter 10. The Wolf in the Tuxedo. The ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum was a kaleidoscope of diamonds, silk, and hypocrisy. Champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes, masking the undercurrent of gossip that buzzed through the air. Ava Bennett felt exposed. The emerald dress, while stunning, felt like it was made of tissue paper against the weight of the stare she was receiving. But it wasn't the dress people were looking at. It was the man attached to her hand. Maximus Hale moved through the crowd like a shark parting a school of tropical fish. He was silent, his grip on her fingers unyielding. His midnight blue tuxedo absorbed the light, making him look less like a guest and more like a tear in the fabric of the room. He didn't look at the art. He looked at the exits, the waiters, the shadows. Max, Ava whispered, leaning into his solid warmth. You're doing it again. Doing what? His voice was a low rumble near her ear, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Scanning the room like you're planning a tactical airstrike. Relax.
Have a crab puff.
I do not eat food I haven't seen prepared, Max replied, steering her away from a waiter with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. And I am not scanning. I am admiring the architecture. You're staring at the ventilation duct. It is a structural weakness. Ava stifled a laugh, but it died in her throat when the crowd in front of them parted. A man stepped forward. He was handsome in a way that set Ava's teeth on edge, too polished, too smooth. He had sandy blonde hair slicked back and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His tuxedo was white, a stark contrast to Max's darkness. Mr. Hale, the man said. His voice was like oiled velvet. I didn't know you frequented the arts. Maximus stopped. His entire body turned to stone. The temperature within a 5-foot radius seemed to drop 10 degrees. Damon, Max said. The name sounded like a curse. And who is this? Damon's gaze slid to Ava. It felt slimy, like a physical touch. He lingered on her face, then dropped lower. His eyes locked onto the red ledger ruby resting against her skin. For a split second, Ava saw Damon flinch. His hand, which had been reaching toward her, jerked back as if he'd felt heat coming off the stone. Ava, Damon said, recovering his composure, but keeping a careful distance from her chest.
A pleasure. That is a remarkable stone. It radiates quite the energy. Is it a family heirloom?
Flea market find, actually, Ava said, trying to keep her voice light despite the tension radiating off Max.
I see.
Damon smiled, showing too many teeth.
It looks heavy. Perhaps I could take it off your hands? I'm something of a collector. She is not selling.
Max cut in. His voice was low, but it carried a vibration that rattled the champagne glasses on a nearby table. Walk away, Damon. Damon chuckled, but his eyes flashed, a quick, sickly yellow. Always so territorial, Maximus. It's a party. We're just talking. He extended a hand toward Ava. May I have this dance, Ava? It was a challenge. Ava could feel it. If she said yes, she angered Max. If she said no, she created a scene. Before she could speak, Maximus moved. He didn't shove Damon. He didn't hit him. He simply stepped between them, using his massive width to block Damon from view entirely. He turned his back on the rival alpha, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than a gnat. We are leaving, Max growled to Ava. We just got here, Ava hissed. People are watching. Let them watch. He didn't give her a choice. He swept her onto the dance floor, but not to leave, to claim. He pulled her into his arms. One hand engulfed her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. The other gripped her hand, lifting it high. Max! Ava gasped as he began to move. He wasn't a clumsy dancer. He moved with a lethal, predatory grace. He spun her, the emerald silk flaring out, and pulled her back so hard she collided with his chest.
That man,
Max spoke against her hair.
is a thief. If he touches you, I will break his fingers.
He just asked for a dance, Max. You're being paranoid.
I am being what is necessary.
He spun her again, dipping her low. The world tilted. All she could see were his stormy gray eyes, burning with gold flakes.
You are mine to protect. Do you understand? Mine.
The word hung between them, heavy and loaded. Mine. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She should be offended. She should be scared. Instead, she felt a pull so strong it made her dizzy. Okay, she whispered, breathless. Yours. Maximus froze for a microsecond, his gaze dropping to her lips. Then he abruptly straightened her up.
The perimeter is compromised. We go, now.
He grabbed her hand and dragged her toward the exit, leaving a fuming Damon staring at their backs. Chapter 11. The Storm Inside. The rain started the moment they exited the museum, a torrential New York downpour that turned the streets into rivers of oil and neon light. Maximus threw Ava into the passenger seat of the Audi RSQ8 like she was a sack of contraband, slammed the door, and vaulted into the driver's seat. He tore out of the parking lot, the tires screeching on the wet asphalt. "Slow down!" Ava yelled, grabbing the "oh shit" handle above the door. "Max, you're going 60 in a 30!" Maximus didn't answer. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. His jaw was locked so tight, Ava worried his teeth would shatter. He was driving with aggressive precision, weaving through traffic like he was fleeing a war zone. "Talk to me!" Ava shouted, her own temper flaring. The adrenaline from the gala was crashing into fear. "What is wrong with you? You embarrassed me back there. You acted like a caveman." "I acted like a bodyguard," Max roared back. The sound filled the car, deafening in the enclosed space. "No, you acted like a jealous ex-boyfriend." Ava unbuckled her seatbelt and turned in her seat to face him. "Who was that guy? Why are you so terrified of a guy in a white tux?" Maximus slammed on the brakes. The Audi skidded to a halt on the side of a deserted street near the park. The rain hammered against the roof, a deafening drum roll. Maximus unbuckled his belt and turned to her. His eyes were wild. "Terrified? You think I am terrified?" He laughed, a dark, humorless sound. "I am not afraid of him, Ava. I am afraid of what I will do to him if he comes near you again. He didn't want the stone. He wanted you." "Me?" Ava blinked. "Why?" "Because he knows," Max growled, leaning over the center console. "He knows what you are to me." "And what am I to you, Max?" Ava's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I'm confused. I'm just a client. I'm just a job, right?" Maximus looked at her. He looked at her wet hair, her flushed cheeks, the pulse fluttering in her throat right next to the red stone. "A job," he repeated. The lie tasted like bile. He looked at her lips, the restraint he had been holding on to for days, the iron control of the Alpha King, snapped. "To hell with the job," he muttered. He reached out, his hand tangling in the hair at the nape of her neck, and pulled her to him. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was desperate, hungry, and possessive. His lips crushed hers, demanding entrance. Ava gasped, and he took the opportunity to deepen the kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting of champagne and rain. Ava didn't fight him. She melted. Her hands flew up, gripping the lapels of his tuxedo, pulling him closer. The static electricity that always buzzed between them exploded into a supernova. Maximus groaned, a low, animalistic sound in his chest. He shifted, trying to get closer, hampered by the center console. His hand slid down her back, pressing her toward him, his thumb digging into her hip. For a moment, there was nothing but the rain, the heat, and the overwhelming scent of mate. Then, Ava's hand brushed against his chest, right over his heart. She pulled back, gasping for air. Her lips were swollen, her eyes wide. "Max," she breathed. "Your heart, it's beating so fast." Maximus stared at her, his chest heaving. His pupils were blown so wide his eyes looked almost black. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying the perfect style. "We need to go," he said, his voice wrecked. "Before I do something we can't undo." He put the car in gear. He drove the rest of the way to the penthouse at exactly the speed limit, staring straight ahead, looking like a man marching to his execution. Chapter 12. The Asset. The morning sun sliced through the glass walls of the penthouse, unforgiving and bright. Ava woke up on the sofa. She had fallen asleep there, fully clothed, waiting for Max to come out of his room. He never had. She sat up, her neck stiff, the emerald dress now wrinkled and sad. The memory of the kiss in the car hit her like a physical blow. She touched her lips, they still tingled. "Okay," she whispered to the empty room. "We crossed a line, a big, blurry line." She needed coffee. She padded into the kitchen, barefoot. She heard voices coming from the study. The door was slightly ajar. Ava paused. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but the tone of Max's voice made her stop. It was cold, professional, devoid of the heat she had felt last night.
"The situation is contained,"
Max was saying. Ava crept closer to the door.
"I saw him, Elias," Max continued. "Damon was at the gala. He knows I have the asset."
Ava froze. The asset?
"No,"
Max snapped.
"I cannot move the asset yet. It's too risky. I need to keep her close until the transfer is complete. Once I have the stone secured in the vault, she is irrelevant."
Ava's blood turned to ice. Irrelevant. She backed away from the door, her heart pounding in her ears. He was talking about her. He had to be. She was the asset. The kiss, the protection, the "you are mine." It was all just a tactic. A way to keep her compliant so he could get the stone. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and sudden. She felt like a fool. She had almost fallen for her bodyguard, and he was just waiting to lock her rock in a vault and toss her aside. She turned and ran back to the living room, grabbing her purse. She needed to leave. She needed to get out of this glass cage. The study door opened. "Ava?" Maximus stood there. He was wearing fresh clothes, jeans and a black Henley. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. He saw her face. He saw the tears she was furiously wiping away. "What is wrong?" He took a step toward her. "Stay away from me," Ava said, her voice shaking. Maximus stopped, confused. "Ava? I heard you." She spat. "On the phone. The asset. Irrelevant. Is that all I am to you, Max? A delivery system for a ruby?" Maximus's face paled. "Ava, no. You misunderstood. I was talking to your handler? Your boss?" She laughed bitterly. "You're a really good actor, Max. The whole possessive protector act? Oscar-worthy. But I'm done. I'm firing you." "You cannot fire me," Max said, his voice hardening. "It is not safe." "I don't care," Ava yelled. "I'd rather take my chances with the wolves in tuxedos than stay one more minute with a liar." She turned to storm out, but as she took a step, the room spun. The stress, the lack of food, the rain, the emotional whiplash, it all crashed down at once. Gray spots danced in her vision. Her knees turned to water. "Ava!" She heard Max's voice, sounded like it was underwater. She felt the floor rush up to meet her. She didn't hit it. Strong arms caught her before she touched the ground. "Ava!" Max shouted, panic cracking his voice. She looked up at him through blurry eyes. He looked terrified. "You're fired," she mumbled. Then the world went black. Chapter 13. The Sick Day. Ava woke up drowning in heat. She was buried under something heavy. She tried to kick it off, but her limbs felt like lead. "Easy," a voice soothed. She blinked one eye open. She was in a bed. A massive bed with sheets that felt like silk clouds. Maximus was sitting on the edge of the mattress. He looked wrecked. His hair was standing up in tufts where he'd run his hands through it. He was holding a wet washcloth. "You have a fever," Max said, his voice surprisingly gentle. 102 degrees. I Googled it. It says you are not dying, but you look terrible. Ava tried to glare at him, but it came out as a weak grimace. "Thanks." "Drink." He held a glass of water to her lips. She took a sip, her throat dry as sandpaper. "Where am I?" she rasped. "My room," Max said. The sofa is not suitable for recovery. Ava looked around. The room was Spartan. Dark wood, gray walls, no personal items anywhere. It was lonely. "I'm still mad at you," she whispered, closing her eyes. "I know," Max said. He placed the cool cloth on her forehead. "Rest now. Be mad later." Ava drifted in and out of sleep for hours. Every time she woke, Max was there. He was constantly checking her temperature, adjusting the blankets, forcing her to drink water. At one point, she woke up shivering violently. "Cold," she chattered. "So cold." The mattress dipped. Max lay down next to her, on top of the covers. He didn't touch her inappropriately. He simply curled his massive body around her trembling form, acting as a human furnace. The heat radiating off him was unnatural. It was like sleeping next to a radiator. Ava instinctively snuggled backward into him. "You run hot," she murmured. "High metabolism," Max whispered into her hair. She fell asleep to the sound of his steady, slow heartbeat. When she woke up again, the shivering had stopped. She felt weak but clear-headed. She turned her head. Max was gone. But someone else was there. Yeti was sitting on her chest, staring at her. "Hi, buddy," Ava croaked. Yeti meowed. He stood up, turned around, and batted something toward her face. It was a dead mouse. A very real, very dead mouse. Ava shrieked. The bedroom door burst open. Max flew in, a handgun in his hand. "What? Who is here?" he shouted, aiming the gun at the corners of the room. "The cat!" Ava pointed at the mouse on her pillow. "He brought me a corpse!" Maximus lowered the gun, exhaling a breath that puffed his cheeks out. He looked at the mouse. He looked at Yeti, who looked incredibly proud of himself. "It is a gift," Max said, holstering the weapon. "He thinks you are a weak hunter because you got sick. He is providing for the pack." "That is disgusting," Ava said, but she was smiling. Max walked over and picked up the mouse by the tail with 2 fingers. "I will dispose of the offering. Do not offend him." He walked to the trash can. "I made soup," he announced. "It is chicken. It does not contain rodents." He returned with a steaming bowl. He sat on the bed and dipped a spoon in. "I can feed myself, Max," Ava said, sitting up. "Your hands are shaking," he noted. "Open." He fed her. It was intimate, quiet, and confusing. This was the man who had snapped necks in an alley, the man who had called her an asset. But he was blowing on her soup so she wouldn't burn her tongue. "Why?" Ava asked softly after a few bites. "Why are you taking care of me, if I'm just a job?" Maximus set the bowl down. He looked at her, his gray eyes guarded. "Because," he said, "even an asset needs maintenance." It was the wrong thing to say. Ava flinched. Maximus sighed. "That was a joke, a bad one. Ava, I cannot explain everything, not yet. But you are not irrelevant. You are the most relevant thing in my life right now." It wasn't an apology, but it was close. Chapter 14. The nightmare night had fallen. The penthouse was shrouded in shadows. Ava was feeling better. The fever had broken. She was lying in Max's bed, watching him sleep in the armchair in the corner. He had refused to leave the room. He sat guard, gun on the table, until exhaustion had finally claimed him. He looked younger when he slept, the harsh lines of his face smoothed out. Suddenly, Max twitched. A low growl emanated from his throat. It wasn't a snore. It was a threat. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair, his knuckles turning white. His head thrashed to the side. "No," he muttered. "Leave them. No." He was having a nightmare. Ava sat up. "Max?" He didn't wake. The growling got louder. His legs kicked out. He was fighting an invisible enemy. "Blood," he gasped. "Too much blood." Ava swung her legs out of bed. She walked across the room, ignoring the cold floor. She reached out to touch his shoulder. "Max, wake up." The moment her fingers brushed his shirt, he exploded. Maximus launched out of the chair, his eyes flying open. But they weren't seeing the room. They were seeing a battlefield. He grabbed Ava's wrist, twisting it, slamming her back against the wall. His hand went to her throat, not to squeeze, but to pin.
"Die!"
He roared. "Max, it's me!" Ava screamed, terrified. "It's Ava!" The sound of her voice pierced the fog. Maximus froze. His hand was wrapped around her throat. His face was inches from hers, his teeth bared in the snarl. His eyes were glowing solid gold. He blinked. The gold faded to gray. Recognition flooded in, followed immediately by horror. He snatched his hand back as if he had been burned. He stumbled away from her, crashing into the dresser.
Ava,
He gasped.
I didn't.
He looked at his hands, shaking. "Did I hurt you?" Ava rubbed her wrist. It would bruise. But she wasn't looking at her arm. She was looking at him. He looked broken. "It was a dream, Max," she said softly. "Just a dream." It wasn't a dream. He whispered, turning his back to her. "It was a memory. The War of the Ashes. I killed. So many." He sank down onto the floor, leaning his back against the dresser, burying his face in his hands. "I am a monster, Ava. You were right to fire me. I am not safe to be around." Ava watched him, the Alpha King, the terrifying bodyguard, reduced to a shivering man on the floor. She didn't leave. She walked over to him. She sat down on the floor next to him. Maximus flinched, but he didn't move away. "Everyone has ghosts, Max," she said. She reached out and took his hand. It was huge, calloused, and trembling. "My ghosts have teeth," he muttered. "So do I," Ava said. "And so does my cat." Maximus let out a shaky, wet laugh. He turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He didn't look at her. He just held on, like she was the only anchor in a storm. "I won't hurt you," he whispered, sounding like a vow. "I will never hurt you." Ava rested her head on his shoulder. "I know." They sat there in the dark, on the floor, holding hands, while the city slept below them. And for the first time, Ava realized that maybe, just maybe, the bodyguard needed saving just as much as she did. Chapter 15. The Glass Fortress Shatters. The dawn didn't bring peace. It brought a silence that felt heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. Ava sat at the kitchen island, nursing a mug of tea. Her fever had broken during the night, leaving her feeling hollowed out but lucid. She watched Maximus. He was pacing the length of the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, terrifying murmur. He was still wearing the jeans and Henley from yesterday, rumpled from sleeping on the floor. He hadn't looked at her since the nightmare incident. The shame radiating off him was palpable, a physical wall he had erected between them. "I don't care how they got the encryption keys," Max snarled into the phone. "Burn the server. If Damon gets access to the perimeter grid, we are sitting ducks." He hung up, slamming the phone onto the marble counter. The screen cracked. "Max," Ava said softly. He didn't turn. "Pack your bag, Ava. We are leaving." "Leaving? Why? I thought this place was a fortress." "A fortress is only as strong as its gatekeeper. Someone compromised the security protocol." He ran a hand through his messy hair, his shoulders tight. "Damon knows we are here. He is not sending thugs this time. He will send a strike team." Ava stood up, her legs wobbly but holding. "Okay, I'll get Yeti." She turned toward the hallway. Click! The sound was small, the distinct mechanical click of a magnetic lock disengaging. It came from the private elevator doors. Maximus froze. His head snapped toward the elevator. The digital panel above the doors, which usually glowed red, had turned a cheerful, inviting green.
Get down!
Max roared. He didn't wait for her to comply. He launched himself across the kitchen, tackling Ava just as the elevator doors slid open. They hit the floor hard, sliding behind the heavy marble island. Dwip, dwip, dwip! Silenced gunshots. 3 rounds shattered the backsplash where Ava's head had been a second ago. Ceramic tiles exploded, raining dust onto them. "Stay here," Max ordered. His eyes were no longer gray. They were molten gold, burning with a violence that made Ava's breath hitch. "Do not move. Do not make a sound." He reached behind his back, pulling a handgun from his waistband. He moved with a speed that blurred the edges of reality, vaulting over the island and into the open. Ava curled into a ball, covering her ears. She heard shouting, voices she didn't recognize. "Secure the asset! Kill the guard!" Then, chaos. It sounded like a hurricane had been unleashed in the living room. Furniture smashed, glass shattered. There were wet, sickening thuds of flesh hitting bone. Max didn't fire his gun. He was using his body. Ava peeked around the edge of the island. 3 men in tactical gear were in the room. 2 were already on the ground, limbs bent at unnatural angles. Max had the third by the throat. He lifted the man, who must have weighed 200 pounds, one-handed, his feet dangling off the floor. "Who gave you the codes?" Max snarled. The sound wasn't human. It was a vibration that rattled Ava's teeth. The man gagged, clawing at Max's arm. He managed to pull a knife from his vest and jammed it into Max's shoulder. Max didn't even flinch. He didn't drop the man. He just squeezed. There was a crunch, and the man went limp. Max dropped the body. He turned, chest heaving, blood soaking the shoulder of his Henley.
"Ava!"
he barked.
"We go, now!"
"Behind you!" Ava screamed. A 4th man had rappelled down from the skylight, a shadow dropping from the ceiling. He landed silently behind Max, a taser baton crackling with blue electricity. Max turned, but not fast enough. The baton jammed into his side. Max roared, dropping to one knee as the voltage coursed through him. The attacker raised the baton for a killing blow to the head. Ava didn't think. She grabbed the first thing her hand touched, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack. She scrambled up and charged. "Hey!" she yelled. The attacker turned, surprised to see the small, pale woman attacking. Ava swung the skillet with every ounce of hysterical strength she possessed. It connected with the side of the man's helmet with a resounding clang. The man stumbled, dazed. That 1 second was all Max needed. He shook off the voltage, grabbed the man's leg, and yanked. As the man hit the floor, Max delivered a single, efficient punch to the temple. The man stopped moving. Silence fell over the penthouse, broken only by the heavy breathing of the 2 survivors and the indignant yowl of a cat. Maximus looked at the man on the floor. Then he looked at Ava, who was standing there in her oversized t-shirt, clutching a frying pan like a warrior's shield. "You," Max rasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder, "are insane." "I saved your life," Ava panted, dropping the pan. Her hands were shaking. "Yes," Max said. He stood up, wincing. He looked at her with an intensity that terrified her more than the gunman. "You did." He grabbed her hand, staining her skin with his blood. "Now we run." Chapter 16. The Exodus. The Audi RSQ8 was no longer a luxury vehicle. It was a battering ram. Maximus drove through the parking garage gate, literally through the wooden arm, and peeled onto the street. He didn't take the highway. He took back roads, weaving through the industrial district, constantly checking the mirrors. Yeti was in his carrier in the back seat, howling a low, mournful protest that sounded like a dying bagpipe. Ava sat in the passenger seat, pressing a towel, which she had grabbed from the gym bag in the back, against Max's shoulder. "You're bleeding," she said, her voice tight. "We need a hospital." "No hospitals," Max gritted out. "They have cameras. They have records. It's a flesh wound." "It's a stab wound, Max. There is a hole in you." "It will close," he said. "Apply pressure." Ava pressed harder. Max hissed, his knuckles whitening on the wheel. "Where are we going?" Ava asked, looking out the window as the city skyline faded into the gray sprawl of the suburbs. "North," Max said. "I have a property, off the grid. No digital locks, no internet, just timber and iron." "A cabin?" Ava asked. "We're going to a cabin in the woods? That is literally how every horror movie starts." "It is defensible," Max said. "And it is on hallowed ground. They cannot track us there." They drove for 4 hours. The landscape shifted from concrete to strip malls, then to rolling hills, and finally to dense, encroaching forest. The sky turned a bruised purple as evening set in. By the time Max turned onto a dirt road that was barely more than a deer trail, Ava's adrenaline had crashed into exhaustion. Her fever was threatening to return. The car bounced over roots and rocks. Finally, they broke through the tree line. The cabin was not a shack. It was a massive A-frame structure built of dark logs and stone, nestled against the side of a mountain. It looked ancient and imposing, blending into the forest shadows. Max killed the engine. The silence of the woods rushed in, absolute and unnerving. "Stay here," he ordered. He got out, gun drawn, and did a perimeter sweep. Ava watched him through the windshield. He moved differently here. In the city, he was stiff, contained. Here, in the woods, he moved like liquid. He sniffed the air. He checked the dirt. He holstered the gun and opened her door. "It's clear." They went inside. The air in the cabin was stale and cold, smelling of pine and dust. Max flipped a switch near the door. Nothing happened. "Generator," he muttered. "I need to start it." He left her in the dark for 5 minutes. Then, a low hum vibrated through the floorboards, and the lights flickered on. They were warm, yellow bulbs that cast long shadows. Ava looked around. The main room was huge, dominated by a stone fireplace. There was a leather sofa, a heavy wooden table, and a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been used in a decade. And there was a loft. Ava looked up. A wooden ladder led to a platform overlooking the living room. On the platform, there was a bed. One bed. "Of course," Ava whispered to the universe. "Of course." Max came back in, carrying the bags and the cat carrier. He set Yeti free. The cat immediately sprinted under the sofa and refused to come out. "There is wood around back," Max said, avoiding her eyes. "I will start a fire. It will get cold tonight." "Max," Ava said. She pointed to the loft. "There's only one bed." Max stopped. He looked up at the loft, then back at her. He looked exhausted, blood still staining his shirt, his face pale. "I will sleep on the floor," he said stiffly. "I am used to it." "You are stabbed," Ava argued. "You are not sleeping on a hardwood floor." "Ava," he warned. "Don't Ava me. We are both adults. We are both tired. And I have seen you in your underwear. Just stop being a martyr." Maximus looked at her. For a moment, she thought he would argue. Then his shoulders slumped. "Fine," he said, "but if I thrash in my sleep again, kick me." Chapter 17. Cabin Fever. The storm hit an hour later. It wasn't just rain, it was a deluge. Thunder shook the cabin walls and lightning illuminated the forest in stark, terrifying flashes. Inside, the fire was roaring. Max had stripped off his bloody shirt to clean the wound. Ava sat on the sofa, clutching a mug of old tea she'd found in the cupboard, trying very hard not to stare. Trying. And failing. Maximus Hale was built. His back was a landscape of muscle and scars. Ridges of white tissue crisscrossed his skin. Claw marks, knife wounds, burn scars. It was a map of violence. He stood by the sink, washing the blood off his shoulder with a rag. It stopped bleeding, Ava noted, her voice shaky. Max paused. He turned to face her. The wound on his shoulder, which had been a gaping puncture hours ago, was now just an angry red slit. It looked like it had been healing for weeks, not hours. "I told you," he said, catching her stare. "I heal fast." "That's not fast, Max. That's miraculous." He didn't answer. He grabbed a clean flannel shirt from a hook on the wall and pulled it on, buttoning it halfway. "The generator is struggling," he said, changing the subject. "I need to check the fuel line." "In this storm?" Ava asked. "I don't mind the rain." He walked out the door, letting a gust of wet wind blow into the room. Ava waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. She got up and walked to the window. She wiped the condensation off the glass. Max wasn't checking the generator. He was standing in the middle of the clearing in the pouring rain. He was chopping wood. He was swinging a heavy axe with a rhythmic, terrifying power. Thwack! Thwack! Splitting logs in single strikes. He wasn't wearing a coat. The rain was plastering the flannel shirt to his body. He looked like he was trying to outrun something inside himself. Ava grabbed a blanket and opened the door. "Max! Get inside! You'll get pneumonia!" He ignored her. He swung the axe again, burying it deep into a stump. He left it there, quivering. He turned to her. His hair was plastered to his skull, water dripping down his face. His chest was heaving. He walked toward her. He didn't stop at the doorway. He walked right past her, bringing the scent of ozone, rain, and wet pine into the room. He went straight to the fire and stood there, shivering. Ava closed the door and locked it. She walked over to him with the blanket. "You're an idiot," she whispered, draping the wool blanket over his shoulders. Maximus froze. He looked down at her hands adjusting the blanket. "I needed to clear my head," he rumbled. Did it work?
No.
He turned to face her. The firelight danced in his gray eyes, turning them molten.
Because every time I close my eyes, I see you. I see you standing in that kitchen with a frying pan. I see you under the batten. I see you dying because of me.
I didn't die, Ava said softly. She reached up, hesitating, then placed her hand on his wet cheek. I'm right here. Maximus leaned into her touch. It was a surrender. The great, terrifying Alpha King, leaning into the palm of a human girl.
That is the problem, he whispered. You are here, and I am dangerously close to forgetting that I am supposed to be protecting you, not wanting you.
The air in the cabin grew thin. The static electricity was back, humming against Ava's skin. Maybe, Ava breathed. I don't need protection right now. Maximus groaned. He grabbed her wrist, the one with the bruise, and pulled her hand away from his face. But he didn't let go. He held it against his chest, right over his heart. It was beating like a jackhammer.
Go to sleep, Ava, he ordered, his voice rough. Go up to the loft, before I do something that will make you hate me.
He turned and walked away, retreating to the darkest corner of the room to sit in the armchair, brooding and wet. Chapter 18. The Lie. Morning brought a cold, gray light and a headache for Ava. She climbed down the ladder, shivering. The fire had died down to embers. Max was not in the chair. She found him on the porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the woods dripping and silent. Max was leaning against the railing, whittling a piece of wood with a terrifyingly sharp knife. Coffee, he said without looking up. He pointed to a metal percolator sitting on a camp stove. It is strong. It will put hair on your chest. Ava poured a cup. It tasted like mud and caffeine. It was perfect. She walked out onto the porch and leaned on the railing next to him. So, she said, looking out at the trees, are we going to talk about it? Max stopped whittling.
Talk about what?
About you, Ava said. She turned to face him. About the fact that you healed a stab wound in 4 hours. About the fact that you threw a 200-pound man across a room like a pillow. About your eyes turning gold. Maximus went still. The knife hovered over the wood. And don't tell me it's refraction, Ava warned. I'm an artist, Max. I know light. Eyes don't glow in the dark. Maximus sighed. He set the wood and knife down on the railing. He stared into the forest for a long time. He started, then stopped. He seemed to be weighing words, calculating the cost of the truth versus the safety of a lie.
I was part of a program, he said finally. Years ago, a military initiative. They wanted soldiers who could see in the dark, who could heal faster, who didn't feel fear.
Ava stared at him. Super soldiers? Like Captain America? Max gave a dry chuckle. Less Captain America, more Frankenstein. They mess with our genetics. It enhanced our reflexes, our strength, but it came with side effects. The eyes? Ava asked. The eyes, Max nodded. And the temper. The adrenaline spikes. Sometimes it's hard to control the aggression. That's why I have the nightmares. That's why I left the service. It was a brilliant lie. It explained the strength, the speed, the healing, the aggression, and the PTSD. It explained everything without using the word werewolf. Ava looked at him. She looked at the tension in his jaw, the sadness in his posture. She believed him, because it made sense in a tragic, broken way. Is that why you have the scars? She asked softly. Max looked down at his arms. Some of them, some are from after. Ava reached out. She took his hand, turning it over to expose the jagged white line running up his forearm. Does it hurt? She asked.
Not anymore.
She lifted his hand. Slowly, giving him time to pull away, she pressed her lips to the scar on his wrist. Maximus flinched. His breath hissed in. You're not a monster, Max. She murmured against his skin. You're just different. Maximus looked down at her bent head. His wolf was howling in triumph, scratching at the door of his mind. She accepts us. She claims us. But she didn't accept him. She accepted a lie. Guilt, sharp and acrid, flooded his mouth. He was manipulating her. He was lying to his mate to keep her close. He gently pulled his hand away.
We need to fortify the cabin, he said, his voice hoarse. Damon won't stop hunting. If he finds us here,
I need to be ready. He walked off the porch, heading toward the woodpile. Ava watched him go. She felt a pang of sadness. He was still building walls. But as she watched him walk away, she noticed something. Yeti was sitting on the porch railing. The cat watched Max go, then looked at Ava. He let out a soft murp. I know, Ava whispered to the cat. He's stubborn, but I think we're wearing him down. Yeti blinked slow, judgmental eyes, as if to say, good luck with that, human. Chapter 19. The Fever Breaking. The weather in the mountains didn't just change, it declared war. By mid-afternoon on Saturday, the rain had crystallized into heavy, wet snow. The temperature plummeted, turning the cabin into a walk-in freezer. The generator, which had been chugging along bravely, let out a final, metallic cough and died. The silence that followed was deafening. Well, Ava said, wrapping her arms around herself. That sounds ominous. Maximus was already moving. He crossed the room to the fireplace, throwing 3 massive logs onto the dying embers. He grabbed the iron poker and stoked the fire until it roared back to life, casting long, dancing shadows against the log walls. The fuel line froze, he muttered, dusting ash off his hands. We are on firepower until the storm passes. Is that a problem? Ava asked. She was sitting on the rug near the hearth, Yeti curled up in her lap like a vibrating heater. No, Max said, not looking at her. It just means close quarters. He walked to the kitchen, found a bottle of whiskey in a dusty cabinet, and poured 2 glasses. He brought them over, handing one to her. Drink, it will warm you. Ava took a sip. It burned going down, but it settled in her stomach like a hot coal. She watched Max. He was restless. He paced the perimeter of the room, checking the windows, checking the door locks. The flannel shirt stretched tight across his back with every movement. Max, she said softly. Sit down. You're making Yeti nervous. Max stopped. He looked at the cat, then at her. He sighed, a sound of defeat, and lowered himself onto the rug opposite her. They sat in silence for a long time, the fire popping and cracking between them. The air in the room was thick, charged with the same static electricity that had been haunting them since the interview. But tonight, without the distractions of the city, without the noise of the penthouse, it was suffocating. Tell me about the necklace, Max said suddenly, nodding at the ruby resting against her collarbone. Ava touched the stone. I told you. Flea market. No, Max said, his eyes locking onto hers. They were dark gray, swirling with hidden depths. Why do you wear it? You have worn it every second since I met you, even in the shower, even when you sleep. Ava hesitated. She looked into the fire. It makes me feel safe. I know that sounds stupid. It's a rock. But ever since I put it on, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Like there was this presence, watching out for me. Maximus went very still. He knew exactly what that presence was. It was the residual magic of his ancestors stored in the gem. It was him. You were lonely, he stated. Yeah, Ava whispered. I guess I was. She looked up at him. The firelight softened the harsh angles of his face. He didn't look like a soldier or a king right now. He just looked like a man who was just as lonely as she was. What about you, Max? She asked. Are you lonely? Maximus looked at her. He looked at her lips, stained slightly dark from the wine. He looked at the pulse fluttering in her throat. I have a pack, he said, the word slipping out before he could catch it. A unit. Men I served with. That's not what I asked. Ava set her glass down. She crawled forward on her knees, closing the distance between them. Yeti, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure, wisely hopped off her lap and trotted to the woodpile. Ava stopped inches from him. She reached out and touched the scar on his chest, visible through the unbuttoned top of his flannel shirt. I asked if you were lonely. Maximus shuddered at her touch. His control, which he had been white-knuckling for days, began to slip. The scent of her, vanilla, whiskey, and invitation, was overwhelming his rational mind. Ava, he groaned, his voice a warning growl. Don't. Why not? she whispered. Her hand moved up, her fingers grazing his jawline. We're in the middle of nowhere. No one is watching. No one is judging. Just us. You don't know what I am, he breathed, closing his eyes. If you knew, you would run. I know you're dangerous, Ava said. She leaned in, her breath ghosting against his lips. I know you're strong. I know you saved my life. Twice. She pressed her lips to the corner of his mouth. Maximus snapped. He didn't mean to. It was instinct. Pure, primal need. He grabbed her waist, his hands large and hot, and pulled her onto his lap. Ava, he growled, burying his face in her neck. He inhaled deeply, taking in her scent, letting it flood his senses. Max, she gasped, her hands tangling in his hair. He kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, angry kiss from the car. This was slower, deeper. It was acclaiming. He kissed her like he was memorizing the taste of her soul. Ava melted against him. The heat radiating off him was unnatural, intoxicating. She felt small in his arms, but not weak. She felt cherished. They moved together, the fire casting frantic shadows on the wall. Clothes were discarded, flannel, denim, wool. Skin met skin, friction and heat. Maximus was careful. He knew his own strength. He knew he could crush her if he lost control. He held back the wolf, forcing himself to be the man. But as the pleasure built, as Ava cried out his name, the wolf clawed its way to the surface. Mine, he whispered against her skin. You are mine. Yours, Ava sobbed. I'm yours, Max. The words shattered his last restraint. In the final, blinding moment of release, Maximus lost the battle. His wolf surged forward, demanding to bind her, to mark her, to ensure that every other male on earth knew she belonged to the king. He buried his face in the crook of her shoulder, his teeth grazed the soft skin, and he bit down. It wasn't a savage bite, it was precise, a breaking of the skin, a mingling of blood, a mark. Ava cried out, sharp and sudden, but it was lost in the crash of their climax. Maximus slumped against her, his breathing ragged, his heart hammering against her chest. Slowly, the fog cleared. The gold faded from his eyes. He realized what he had done. He tasted copper. He pulled back, horrified. There, on the delicate skin where her neck met her shoulder, was a bite mark. It was already closing, sealing itself with a faint silvery shimmer. He had marked her. He had bonded her to him without her consent. Max? Ava whispered, her eyes closed, a sleepy smile on her face. You bit me. Maximus choked. I'm sorry, I didn't. It's okay, she murmured, snuggling into his chest. I like it. She drifted off to sleep within seconds, exhausted and safe. Maximus lay there in the firelight, holding her, staring at the ceiling with terrified eyes. Chapter 20. The Change. Ava woke up to the sound of a heartbeat. It was loud. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Slow, steady, and powerful. It sounded like a drum beating right next to her ear. She opened her eyes. She was in the loft bed. Sunlight was streaming through the A-frame window, blindingly bright off the snow outside. She was alone in the bed. She sat up, stretching. Her body felt different. She felt fantastic. Better than fantastic. She felt electric. Her vision seemed sharper. She could see the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams with distinct clarity. She could smell the pine trees outside, the wood smoke, and coffee. Strong, dark coffee. And she could still hear that heartbeat. Max? She called out.
Down here.
His voice came from the main room. Ava swung her legs out of bed. She frowned. She usually woke up groggy, needing 3 alarms and a prayer. Today, she felt like she could run a marathon. She walked to the bathroom mirror to splash water on her face. She froze. She pulled the collar of her oversized t-shirt down. There, on her shoulder, was the mark. It wasn't a bruise. It wasn't a scab. It was a scar, fully formed, as if it had been there for years. It was shaped like a jawline, shimmering with a faint, pearlescent silver hue. It was beautiful in a savage way. She touched it. A jolt of warmth zinged through her body. Safe, a voice whispered in the back of her mind. He is here. Whoa, Ava whispered. Okay, rough night. She quickly brushed her teeth and climbed down the ladder. Maximus was in the kitchen. He was fully dressed, back in his jeans and flannel. He was standing with his back to her, gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles were white. "Morning," Ava said, walking over to the coffee pot. Maximus flinched. He turned slowly. He looked terrible. His eyes were shadowed, his face pale. He looked like a man waiting for a sentencing. "Ava," he said, his voice rough, "how do you feel?" "Incredible." "Actually," Ava poured a cup. "I slept like the dead, and weirdly, I feel like I had 5 espressos. Is that normal?" She leaned against the counter, smiling at him. "Also, you run really loud. I can hear your heart beating from here." Maximus went rigid. "You can hear it?" "Yeah, thump, thump. It's kind of comforting." She took a sip of coffee. "So, the shoulder. We should talk about the shoulder." Maximus closed his eyes. "Ava, I hurt you. You didn't hurt me, Max." She interrupted softly. She walked over and placed a hand on his arm. "It was intense, but I'm not made of glass. And look." She pulled her collar down to show him the mark. "It's already healed. It looks kind of cool, like a tattoo." Maximus stared at the mark. It called to him. It sang to him. It was the physical proof that she was his queen, but she didn't know what it meant. She thought it was just a love bite. She didn't know that she would now feel his pain, sense his location, and live as long as he did. "It is a side effect," he lied, his voice sounding hollow. "Of the enhancement, my DNA. It carries certain properties, viral transference." Ava blinked. "Wait, did you just say you gave me super soldier cooties?" Maximus looked at her, baffled. "Cooties?" Ava burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Max, your face! You look so serious. So what? Now I'm going to have super strength? Am I going to turn green when I get mad?" "No," Max said quickly. "Just heightened senses. Maybe some increased stamina. It will fade." Another lie. It would never fade. "Well," Ava shrugged, "I can live with that, as long as I don't grow a tail." Maximus choked on his own spit. "I need to check the perimeter," he said abruptly, grabbing his coat. "Stay inside." He fled the cabin as if the hounds of hell were snapping at his heels. Ava watched him go, smiling. Then she frowned. She tilted her head. She could hear him walking through the snow. She could hear the crunch of his boots. She could hear his breathing. She walked to the window. He was 50 yards away. "That," she whispered to herself, "is really good hearing." Chapter 21. The Slip-Up. By noon, the tension in the cabin had shifted. Max was avoiding her, staying outside, chopping wood, which Ava was pretty sure was just him destroying the local ecosystem out of sexual frustration/guilt. Ava was in the kitchen, feeding Yeti the last of the tuna. "He's weird today, Yeti," she told the cat. "He keeps looking at my neck and then looking like he wants to jump out a window." Yeti ignored her, focused on the fish. Suddenly, Ava's head snapped up. A sound, far away, but getting closer. An engine. "Max," she yelled, running to the door. Max was already there. He had heard it too. He was sprinting from the tree line, his axe in hand. "Get back," he roared. "Get away from the windows." Ava retreated, grabbing Yeti. Max burst through the door, locking it behind him. He grabbed his gun from the table. "Is it them?" Ava whispered. "The Packless?" "No," Max said, tilting his head. "The engine. It's a Land Rover. Diesel. It's friendly." He lowered the gun, his shoulders sagging with relief. "It's Elias." "Who is Elias?" "My associate. He must have tracked the Audi's emergency transponder. I didn't think the signal would punch through the storm." A minute later, a battered green Land Rover pulled up in front of the cabin. A man hopped out. He was tall, lean, with sandy hair and a face that looked like it had been punched a few times, but was still charming. He carried 2 massive duffel bags. Max opened the door. "You're hard to find, boss," Elias said, grinning. He stomped the snow off his boots and walked in. He stopped dead when he saw Ava. Elias's eyes went wide. He looked at Ava, then he looked at Max. Then he looked at the silvery mark on Ava's neck, visible above her t-shirt collar. Elias dropped the bags. Thud. He immediately dropped to one knee, bowing his head low. "Luna," Elias said, his voice full of reverence. "Forgive me. I didn't know the claiming was complete." Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. Ava stared at the man kneeling on her floor. "Luna." Maximus stiffened. He looked at Elias with murder in his eyes. "Elias, stand up. Shut up." Elias looked up, confused. "But, she is marked. She is the queen. Outside," Max barked. "Now." He grabbed Elias by the collar of his jacket and dragged him backward out onto the porch, slamming the door in Ava's face. Ava stood there. Luna, she knew that word. She read books. She watched movies. Luna meant moon. Luna meant wolf. The pieces slammed together in her mind. The alpha vibe. The growling. The strength. The hearing. The yellow eyes. The packless. The bite mark. And now, Luna. "Oh my God," she whispered. She backed away from the door, her hand flying to her mouth. "He's not Captain America. He's a werewolf." She looked at Yeti. "My boyfriend is a werewolf." Yeti licked his paw, unimpressed. Outside, the arguing was muffled but heated. Ava crept to the window. "You idiot," Max was hissing. "She doesn't know." "You marked her, Maximus," Elias argued back. "You bound her to the pack. How can she not know?" "I told her it was a virus." "A virus? You told the true mate she has a virus? You are the Alpha King, not a doctor. This is treason against the bond." Ava backed away from the window. Her heart was racing, not with fear, but with shock. Alpha King. She looked at the frying pan on the counter. She looked at the door. She was going to kill him. Chapter 22. The Ambush. The door opened. Max and Elias walked back in. Max looked furious. Elias looked sheepish.
Ava,
Max started, putting on a fake smile.
Elias is dramatic. It's a code name. Luna means lunar unit, tactical, night ops.
Ava crossed her arms. She stared at him. "Cut the crap, Max." Max froze.
Excuse me?
"Luna," Ava said, stepping forward. "Alpha, pack, the growling, the sniffing, the fact that my cat likes you and he hates humans." She poked him in the chest. "You're a wolf." Maximus stared at her. The lie died in his throat. He saw the intelligence in her eyes. There was no point.
Yes,
He said simply. Ava let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Okay, so, do you have a tail? Like, right now?" Elias snorted, trying to suppress a laugh. Max shot him a glare that could peel paint. "No," Max said. "I shift. Into a wolf. A large one." "And the bite?" Ava touched her neck. "The virus?" "A mating mark," Max admitted, looking at the floor. "It binds you to me. It makes you queen of the shifters." Ava sat down heavily on the sofa. "I went from jewelry designer to queen of the werewolves in 4 days. That is a lot on a resume." "I intended to tell you," Max said, kneeling in front of her. He took her hands. I didn't want you to fear me." "I don't fear you," Ava said softly. She looked at his eyes. "I'm just processing." Suddenly, Elias's head snapped up. He sniffed the air. "Max," Elias said, his voice dropping all humor. "Sulfur." Maximus was on his feet instantly. He pulled Ava up, shoving her behind him. "How many?" Max demanded. "Dozens," Elias said, drawing a handgun. "They surrounded us. Upwind. They masked their scent." Crash. The window shattered. A canister rolled into the room. "Gas!" Max roared. "Don't breathe!" He grabbed Ava and threw her toward the kitchen, covering her body with his. The canister exploded, releasing a cloud of thick purple smoke. It wasn't tear gas. It was Wolfsbane. Maximus coughed, his knees buckling. Ava, run. The door was kicked in. Figures in tactical gear poured into the room. But they weren't human. Their eyes glowed yellow. They moved with animal speed. "Secure the king!" a voice shouted. Maximus roared. He didn't shift. The Wolfsbane was preventing it, but he fought. He grabbed the nearest attacker and threw him through the wall. "Elias, get her out," Max shouted, swinging a heavy chair to crush another attacker. Elias grabbed Ava's arm. "Luna, come on!" "No, Max!" Ava screamed, trying to pull away. "Go!" Max turned to look at her, his eyes bleeding gold and gray. "I will find you. I promise." A massive rogue tackled Max from behind. Another hit him with a club. Max went down, fighting like a demon, disappearing under a pile of bodies. Elias dragged Ava toward the back door. But the back door opened. Standing there was a man in a white suit, immaculate, smiling. Damon. "Going somewhere?" Damon asked. He raised a hand. A pulse of energy, pure alpha command, slammed into them. Elias crumpled, unconscious. Ava stood alone, trembling, clutching the frying pan she had managed to grab. Damon stepped over Elias. He looked at Ava. He looked at the mark on her neck. "Beautiful," he purred. "He marked you." "Good, that makes you even more valuable." He reached out. Ava swung the pan. Damon caught her wrist effortlessly. He smiled, leaning in close. "Sleep, little queen," he whispered. He pressed a pressure point on her neck. The world went black. Chapter 23, The Golden Cage. Consciousness returned to Ava, not with a bang, but with the clink of fine china. She groaned, the sound vibrating in her skull like a plucked cello string. Her neck throbbed where Damon had pressed the pressure point, but a deeper, sharper ache pulsed in her shoulder, the silver mark Max had left. She opened her eyes. She wasn't in a dungeon. She wasn't in a warehouse. She was in a room that looked like it had been ripped from the pages of Architectural Digest and sterilized with bleach. Everything was white. White leather sofas, white marble floors, white velvet drapes covering floor-to-ceiling windows. It was cold. It smelled of lilies and antiseptic. Ava sat up, clutching her head. She was still wearing her jeans and t-shirt, which felt dirty and out of place in this pristine tomb. "You're awake," a smooth voice said. Ava scrambled back against the headboard of the massive white bed. Damon was sitting in a wingback chair across the room. He was still wearing the white suit, unblemished by the chaos at the cabin. He held a teacup in one hand and a tablet in the other. He looked bored. "Where is he?" Ava demanded. Her voice was raspy. "Where is Max?" Damon took a sip of tea. "The Alpha King? Likely dead. My men were instructed to burn the cabin once we left. Wood burns so quickly, doesn't it?" Ava felt the blood drain from her face. "You're lying." "Am I?" Damon stood up, placing the cup on a glass table. He walked toward her. He breathed in enough wolfsbane to kill an elephant. And he was outnumbered 20-1. Even a king bleeds, Ava. "No," Ava whispered. She reached up, touching the mark on her neck. It was warm. It was humming. She closed her eyes and focused. She didn't know how the bond worked, but Max had said it bound them. She reached out with her mind, searching for something. And she found it. It wasn't a voice. It was a sensation. It was a deep, black, roiling ocean of pure rage. It was faint, distant, but it was there. He wasn't dead. He was furious. Ava opened her eyes, a spark of defiance lighting them up. "He's alive." Damon paused. He looked at the mark on her neck, his expression tightening. "Ah, the bond. It persists. Pity. It means I'll have to kill him in person." He stopped at the foot of the bed. "But that is a concern for later. Right now, we need to discuss your role, Ava." "My role?" Ava spat. "I'm a hostage. I'm leverage. I get it." "Leverage?" Damon laughed softly. "Oh, darling, no. You are so much more than that. You are the key." He pointed a manicured finger at the red ledger ruby hanging around her neck. "Do you know what that stone is?" "A ruby," Ava said. "A $5 ruby."
It is the heart of the first alpha. Damon corrected. It contains enough raw magic to level a city. It grants the holder absolute dominion over every pack on the continent. But there is a catch. He leaned in, his yellow eyes flashing. A wolf cannot touch it. The magic is too volatile. It burns us. It drives us mad.
The only way an alpha can wield the stone is through a conduit. A human conduit. Ava's stomach twisted. What are you talking about? Maximus couldn't use the stone, Damon explained, his voice dripping with false sympathy. He needed a human to wear it. But a human body is fragile. The stone's power would kill you in days. Unless... He gestured to her neck. Unless you were marked. The mark reinforces your body. It binds your life force to his, making you strong enough to carry the stone for him. He smiled, a cruel, twisting thing. He didn't mark you because he loved you, Ava. He didn't bite you because you are his queen. He marked you because he needed a battery pack. You were just a piece of equipment to him, a vessel for the weapon. Ava stared at him. The room seemed to tilt. He marked you because he needed a human conduit. It made sense. The way he called her, the asset. The way he tried to keep it professional. The way he only marked her after she found out about the ruby's power. The way Elias had been horrified, not because of love, but because of treason. You're lying, Ava said, but her voice wavered. Am I? Damon walked to the door. Ask yourself, Ava. A king who has lived for centuries, who has wealth and power beyond imagination. Did he really fall in love with a chaotic, human jewelry designer in 4 days? Or did he just find the perfect carrier for his ambition? He opened the door. Think about it. Dinner is at 8. Wear something nice. I hate denim. The door clicked shut and locked. Ava sat alone in the white room. She clutched the ruby. It felt heavy now. It felt like a shackle. She touched the bite mark. A moment ago, it had felt like a connection. Now, it felt like a brand, a receipt of ownership. He's lying, she whispered to the empty room. Max wouldn't. But the doubt, cold and insidious, began to coil around her heart like a snake. She closed her eyes, trying to feel the bond again. She felt the rage, but now she wondered, was it rage for her or rage for his stolen property? Chapter 24. The Feral King. The cabin was a tomb of smoke and bodies. Maximus Hale gasped, his lungs burning as if he had inhaled broken glass. His eyes snapped open. He was buried. Heavy, dead weight pressed down on him from all sides. The scent of copper and charred wood filled his nose. He shoved upward. A rogue's body rolled off him. Then another. Maximus rose from the pile of corpses like a demon clawing its way out of hell. He was covered in blood, some his, mostly theirs. His flannel shirt was in ribbons. His jeans were soaked dark. He stood in the center of the ruined living room. The wolfsbane gas had dissipated, leaving only a headache that pounded behind his eyes like a sledgehammer. Ava, he croaked. The room was empty. The door was hanging off its hinges. The wind howled outside, carrying snow into the house. She was gone. A sound came from the floor near the kitchen, a groan. Maximus turned. Elias was trying to sit up, clutching his head. Boss? Elias mumbled, blinking groggily. Did we win? Maximus didn't answer. He frantically tapped the chronograph on his wrist, searching for a signal. The screen flashed red. No signal. They found the tracker, Max hissed, smashing the watch against the wall. He walked over to Elias, grabbed him by the front of his jacket, and hauled him to his feet. Where did they take her? Max snarled. His eyes were not gray. They were not shifting. They were solid, glowing, molten gold. Elias winced, seeing the eyes. He knew that look. That was the look of the king who had ended the War of the Ashes. That was the look of a man who had stopped being a man. Damon! Elias gasped. His stronghold, the old bank building in the city, the vault. Maximus dropped him. He turned and marched toward the door. Max, wait! Elias stumbled after him. You can't just storm the vault. It's a fortress. We need a plan. We need the pack. I am the pack, Max growled. He didn't stop walking. He stepped out into the snow. The Land Rover, Elias's vehicle, was still parked there, covered in a dusting of white. The rogues hadn't disabled it. They had been too focused on the dead king. Maximus ripped the driver's side door open. Max! Elias grabbed his arm. Think. If you go in there feral, you'll get her killed. You need to calm down. Maximus turned on him. He bared his teeth. A low, vibrating snarl ripped from his chest. It was so primal that Elias instinctively let go and took a step back, baring his neck in submission. "They took my mate," Max said. The voice wasn't his, it was the wolf's. "I am going to burn their world down." He climbed into the car. Meow. Maximus froze. He looked down. Sitting in the passenger seat of the Land Rover, looking incredibly annoyed, was a white Persian cat. Yeti. The cat had apparently escaped the cabin during the fight and had decided that the car was the warmest place to wait out the apocalypse. Maximus stared at the cat. The cat stared at Maximus. "Get out," Max growled. Yeti hissed. He dug his claws into the upholstery and settled in, glaring. "I am going where the food giver went." Maximus looked at the cat. He gripped the steering wheel, his claws punching through the leather cover. He wanted to throw the cat into the snow. He wanted to drive. He wanted to kill. But this was her cat. If he lost the cat, Ava would never forgive him. Assuming she was alive to forgive him. "Fine," Max slammed the door. "But if you shed on me, I will eat you." Elias scrambled into the back seat just as Max gunned the engine. "Buckle up," Elias muttered to the cat. Maximus slammed his foot onto the gas pedal. The Land Rover roared, spinning its tires in the snow before launching forward down the mountain trail. Maximus didn't feel the cold. He didn't feel the bruises on his body. He felt only one thing: the pull. It was a physical line attached to his chest, stretching miles into the distance. He could feel her fear. He could feel her confusion, and beneath it all, he could feel her heart beating. Thump, 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 thump. It was the only sound in the universe that mattered. "Hold on, Ava," he whispered, his eyes burning gold in the rearview mirror. "I'm coming." Chapter 25. The Monster. Dinner with Damon was exactly as Ava expected. Elegant, expensive, and nauseating. He had forced her to change into a white silk dress that he provided. It was beautiful, but it felt like a shroud. They sat at a long glass table in a dining room that overlooked the city skyline. "Try the sea bass," Damon said, cutting his fish with surgical precision. "It's flown in from Chile." "I'm not hungry," Ava said. She gripped the steak knife next to her plate. "I want to go home." "Home?" Damon raised an eyebrow. "To the loft full of glue guns, or the penthouse that belongs to the agency? You have no home, Ava. That's why you were so easy to collect." Ava flinched. The insult landed. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "If you want the stone, take it. Kill me and take it." "I told you." Damon sighed, wiping his mouth. "I can't touch it. And I don't want to kill you, Ava. You're valuable. With you by my side, controlled, compliant, I can wield the king's power. I can unite the rogue factions. We could rule this city." He stood up and walked toward her. "Think about it. Forget Maximus. He is a relic. A soldier who doesn't know the war is over. I am a businessman. I can give you the world." He placed his hands on her shoulders. Ava stiffened. She could smell him, expensive cologne and sulfur. It was wrong. It made her skin crawl. "Get off me," she whispered. "Soon you will understand," Damon murmured, leaning down to smell her hair. "Once the bond fades, once you realize he abandoned you." Boom! The building shook. Ava grabbed the table to steady herself. "What was that?" Damon frowned. He looked at the door. "Perimeter breach." Crash! The massive freight elevator doors at the end of the dining hall exploded inward, buckled by the force of 2 tons of steel. A Land Rover, dented, covered in mud and snow, with one headlight hanging by a wire, roared out of the shaft and came skidding across the polished marble floor. It smashed through the table, sending crystal and sea bass flying, and slammed into the far wall. Silence. Damon took a step back, brushing dust off his suit. Subtle. The driver's side door was kicked open. It didn't just open, it flew off its hinges. Maximus stepped out. Ava gasped. He didn't look like Max.
He looked like a nightmare. He was covered in dried blood and soot. His eyes were twin suns of burning gold. His teeth were bared in a rictus snarl. He was vibrating with an energy so violent the air around him seemed to distort. "Damon," Max said. It wasn't a voice. It was a death sentence. "Maximus." Damon sneered, though Ava saw him take a step back. "You survived. How cockroach-like of you." Maximus didn't speak. He moved. He blurred across the room. Damon tried to block, shifting partially, his face elongating into a snout. It didn't matter. Maximus hit him with the force of a freight train. He grabbed Damon by the lapels of his white suit and slammed him into the floor. The marble cracked. Maximus pounded his fist into Damon's face. Crunch. And again. Crunch. And again. Blood sprayed across the white floor. It splattered onto Ava's dress. "Max!" Ava screamed. "Stop! You're killing him!" Maximus didn't hear her. He was lost. The wolf had the controls. He lifted Damon up and threw him through the glass window overlooking the city. Damon didn't fall. He caught the ledge, scrambling, hanging on by his fingertips. Maximus walked to the window. He was going to push him. He was going to watch him fall 40 stories. "Max, stop!" Ava ran forward. She grabbed his arm. Maximus spun around. He snarled at her. It was a feral, mindless sound. He raised his hand, claws extended, ready to strike whatever had touched him. Ava froze. She looked into his eyes. There was no recognition. There was only the monster. "Max?" she whispered, terrified. She flinched, raising her hands to protect her face. The flinch broke him. Maximus froze. His hand hovered in the air, inches from her face. He saw her fear. He smelled it. The gold in his eyes flickered. The gray bled back in, agonizingly slow. He looked at his hand, covered in blood, claws out. He looked at Ava, cowering, wearing Damon's dress, terrified of him. "Ava," he choked out. The monster receded, leaving a horrified man in its wake. "Did you?" Ava's voice shook. She looked at Damon, who was pulling himself back over the ledge, bloody and broken, fleeing toward the elevator. "You were going to kill him." "He took you," Max rasped. He took a step toward her. Ava took a step back. The movement was small, but it severed something between them. Maximus stopped. He looked at the space between them. He looked at the blood on his hands. Damon's lie whispered in Ava's ear. "He is a weapon. You are just a vessel." "Let's go," Max said, his voice dead. "Elias is waiting." He didn't try to touch her. He turned and walked toward the wrecked Land Rover, leaving bloody footprints on the white marble. Ava watched him go. She touched the ruby on her neck. It felt colder than ever. Chapter 26. The Severed Bond. The elevator ride down from the 41st floor of the vault was a masterclass in suffocating silence. Maximus stood in the corner, as far away from Ava as the small steel box would allow. He was still covered in the grime of war, dried blood, soot, and dust matting his hair and staining his skin, but it was his eyes that terrified Ava. They were back to gray, but they were flat, dead, like the windows of an abandoned house. The elevator dinged. The lobby. Maximus walked out first. He didn't check the perimeter. He didn't offer his arm. He simply marched toward the shattered front entrance where his support team, a dozen wolves in tactical gear, were securing the building. "Clear the area," Max barked at a subordinate. "Get a clean car." He turned back to the wreckage of the Land Rover, which was still smoking in the middle of the dining room debris, which had crashed down through the open atrium. He ripped the back door open. Yeti was sitting on the headrest, looking unbothered. Maximus scooped the cat up. He walked over to Ava and extended his arms. He didn't hand the cat to her. He deposited the animal into her arms like he was handing over a parcel bomb. "Take him," Max said. His voice was gravel. "He is safe." Ava clutched the cat to her chest, the white silk of Damon's dress now smeared with soot from Yeti's paws. "Max," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "What happens now?" Maximus looked over her head. He couldn't look at her. If he looked at her, he would see the flinch again. He would see the fear in her eyes when she looked at his claws. And that fear would kill him faster than any silver bullet. "You go home," he said. "My team has secured your old apartment. I bought the property this morning.
The other tenants have been relocated, and the lobby is filled with my best guards. You will be safe there." "And you?" Ava asked. She took a step toward him. Maximus took a step back. The movement was a physical blow. Ava stopped, her heart twisting in her chest. "I go back to where I belong," Max said. "To the shadows." "You were right, Ava. I am a monster. I am not a bodyguard. I am a weapon, and weapons do not get happy endings." "I never said you were a monster," Ava argued, tears pricking her eyes. "I was scared. You threw a man out a window." "And I enjoyed it," Max snarled softly. He looked at her then, his gaze intense and self-loathing. "That is the difference. You looked at me and saw a killer. Damon was right. You are a vessel for the stone. I am the danger to your life." Max signaled to one of his guards, who immediately handed him a secure satellite phone. Max pressed it into her hand, careful not to let his skin brush hers. "If you are ever in danger, press 1. I will come. But until then, goodbye, Ava." He turned and walked away. He walked out into the night, into the snow, without looking back. 2 weeks later, Ava sat on the floor of her jewelry studio, staring at a pile of unstrung pearls. She felt like she was dying. It wasn't a flu. It wasn't food poisoning. It was a hollow, aching, physical pain that lived in the center of her chest. It felt like someone had tied a string to her heart and was slowly, methodically pulling it out of her ribcage. The mating sickness. She had Googled it. Well, she had Googled wolf shifter romance breakup symptoms and found some very questionable forums, but the consensus was clear. Separation from a fated mate caused physical deterioration. She looked terrible. She had lost weight. Her skin was pale. The mark on her neck, which she covered with a scarf, throbbed constantly, a dull, rhythmic reminder of what she had lost. "You're pathetic," she told herself, picking up a pearl. Yeti, who was currently sleeping on a pile of invoices, opened one eye. He let out a low, mournful murr. He missed Max too. He had spent the last 2 weeks sitting by the front door, waiting for the heavy footsteps that never came. "He used us, Yeti," Ava said, her voice cracking. "He needed a battery for his magic rock, that's all." She touched the red ledger ruby. She had tried to take it off. She couldn't. Every time she undid the clasp, her hands would shake uncontrollably, and panic would seize her throat. The stone wanted to be there. Or maybe Max wanted it there. Thump, thump. She heard it. The phantom heartbeat. It was faint now, like a radio station losing signal, but it was still there. She couldn't take it anymore. She stood up. "I'm going out. I need coffee. I need air. I need to stop waiting for a werewolf who dumped me." She grabbed her coat and marched out of the apartment, ignoring the black SUV parked across the street where Max's detail watched her. Chapter 27. The Grand Gesture. The coffee shop was crowded, smelling of roasted beans and wet raincoats. Ava ordered a black coffee, she was too bitter for sugar, and waited by the counter. She felt it before she saw it. A prickle on the back of her neck, the hair on her arm standing up, the ruby growing hot against her skin. Danger. She spun around. The shop was full of normal people, a mom with a stroller, a student with a laptop, and a man in a gray hoodie standing by the door. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was looking at her. His eyes were a sickly, jaundiced yellow. A straggler, one of Damon's loyalists who had escaped the purge. Ava dropped her coffee, the cup shattered, splashing hot liquid on her boots. The man smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. Not a normal knife, a curved silver blade. Outside, tires screeched. The doors of the black SUV flew open, the guards sprinting toward the shop, shouting. But they were too far away. "For the Alpha," the rogue whispered. He lunged. The customer screamed. Ava scrambled back, tripping over a chair. She fell hard, hitting her elbow. The rogue was on her in a second, faster than the guards could reach the door. He raised the knife. "Max!" Ava screamed. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was a soul-deep cry. Crash.
The front window of the coffee shop exploded. It wasn't a car this time. It was a body. A massive dark shape smashed through the glass, sending shards flying like diamond rain. Maximus Hale landed in a crouch between Ava and the rogue. He didn't look like a businessman. He didn't look like a bodyguard. He looked like the god of war. He was wearing a black tactical vest over a t-shirt, his arms bare and rippling with tension. The rogue froze, the knife hovering in the air. "King!" The rogue whimpered. Maximus stood up. He didn't growl. He didn't shout. He simply reached out, grabbed the rogue's face with one hand, and slammed him into the floor. The impact shook the building. The rogue went limp instantly. Maximus didn't finish him. He turned. He looked at Ava. His eyes were gold. Bright, burning, desperate gold. "Ava." He breathed. He fell to his knees. The entire coffee shop went silent. People were filming. Someone was calling the cops. Ava didn't care. She stared at the man kneeling in the spilled coffee and glass shards. "You came," she whispered. "I never left," Maximus rasped. "I've been outside every night. I have been watching your window. I couldn't be away." He crawled forward, ignoring the glass cutting into his jeans. He reached for her, his hands trembling. "You called me," he said, touching her face. "I felt it. You screamed my name." "I thought you didn't want me," Ava sobbed, hitting his chest weakly. "Damon said you only marked me for the stone, that I was just a conduit." Maximus looked devastated. "A conduit? Ava, look at me." He grabbed her hand and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. It was beating so fast it felt like a hummingbird's wings. "The stone is power," he said intensely. "But you are my breath. You are my blood. I didn't mark you to use the ruby. I marked you because my wolf recognized his other half. If I lose the stone, I lose a kingdom. If I lose you, I lose my soul." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I tried to stay away. I thought I was protecting you from my darkness. But the last 2 weeks, it has been hell. I am dying without you, Ava." Ava looked at him. She saw the dark circles under his eyes. She felt the tremor in his hands. He wasn't lying. "I'm dying too," she whispered. "I have mating sickness. It sucks. I lost 5 pounds and Yeti is depressed." Maximus let out a wet, choked laugh. "I will buy Yeti a tuna factory. I will buy you the moon. Just take me back. Let me protect you. Let me love you." "On one condition," Ava said, wiping her tears. "Anything." "No more running. If you go feral, I go feral. We do it together." Maximus smiled. It was a genuine, blinding smile that made his gold eyes shine. "Deal." He leaned in and kissed her. It was messy, salty with tears, and tasted like coffee. It was the best kiss of Ava's life. Behind them, a barista slowly lowered his phone. Best shift ever. Chapter 28. The Wedding of Two Worlds, 6 months later. The invitation had been embossed on heavy cream cardstock. Together with their families and packs, Ava Bennett and Maximus Hale invite you to witness the union of 2 souls and 1 very large bank account. The venue was a compromise. Ava wanted outdoors. Max wanted security. They settled on a private estate in the Hamptons that was surrounded by 20-foot walls and patrolled by the entire eastern seaboard pack. It was a full moon, naturally. The ceremony was taking place in a clearing surrounded by ancient oak trees strung with thousands of fairy lights. On the left side of the aisle sat the humans, Ava's parents, who thought Max was in private security, her art school friends, and a few confused cousins. On the right side sat the wolves. They were huge, stiff in their tuxedos, and trying very hard not to growl at the catering staff. The music started. A string quartet played a hauntingly beautiful version of Can't Help Falling in Love. Ava stepped out of the manor. She wore a dress that made the emerald gala gown look like a rag. It was white lace, fitted to her curves, with a train that flowed like water. But the most striking accessory was the necklace. The red ledger ruby sat proudly at her throat, no longer hanging on cheap gold, but reset into a reinforced platinum bezel that Max had commissioned, unbreakable, just like them. Her father, a sweet man who owned a hardware store in Jersey, offered her his arm. "He's a big fella, that Max," her dad whispered as they started walking. "You sure he's gentle?" Ava looked down the aisle. Maximus stood at the altar. He was wearing a black tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. His hair was tamed, barely. He was watching her with an intensity that made the air crackle. His eyes were gray, but she could see the gold flecks dancing. "Yeah, Dad." Ava smiled. "He's a teddy bear." They reached the altar. Her dad handed her over. Max took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, and possessive. "You look..." Max swallowed, his voice rough. "Dangerous." "Good." Ava winked. "And now," the officiant, Elias, who had got ordained online for this, announced, "The rings." Everyone turned. Walking down the aisle was the ring bearer, Yeti. The cat was wearing a custom-made tuxedo vest with a tiny bow tie. A velvet pillow was strapped to his back. He did not walk, he strutted. He paused halfway down the aisle to sniff a human guest's shoe, hissed at a wolf who looked at him wrong, and then continued to the altar. Maximus knelt down to retrieve the rings from the cat's back. "Good job, Menace," he whispered. Yeti headbutted Max's knee. "Give me the salmon." The vows were exchanged. Max promised to protect her heart. Ava promised to protect his sanity. "I pronounce you Alpha and Queen," Elias grinned. "You may kiss the bride." Maximus didn't wait. He swept Ava into his arms, dipping her low, and kissed her until her toes curled. The wolf side of the aisle let out a collective howl. It started low and rose to a crescendo. The humans jumped, looking terrified. Ava broke the kiss, laughing. She looked at her parents, who were clutching each other. "It's okay," she yelled over the howling. "It's a family tradition." Maximus stood up, looking at his pack, then at his wife. He raised his hand, and the howling stopped instantly. "My queen," he said, offering his arm. "My king," Ava replied. They turned and walked back down the aisle, showered in white rose petals. They reached the end of the path where the getaway car was waiting. It wasn't the Audi, it was Bumble. The yellow VW Beetle. Max had restored it. The engine purred, actually purred this time. The paint was flawless. "You fixed him," Ava gasped. "I reinforced the chassis, added bulletproof glass, and upgraded the engine to a V8, Max said proudly. "It is now a tactical assault vehicle. That looks like a lemon." Ava laughed, throwing her arms around his neck. "I love you." "I love you," Max growled against her ear. "Now get in. I have a honeymoon to start, and I've been waiting 6 months to claim you properly." They climbed into the tiny yellow car. Max's knees hit the dashboard. Yeti jumped into the back seat. As they drove off into the moonlight, the just-married cans rattling behind them, Ava looked at her husband, the Alpha King, the billionaire, the werewolf, struggling to shift gears in her tiny car. She smiled. Life was going to be wild, and she wouldn't have it any other way. The end.